Chapter 633. War. It was the most intense and destructive behavior of all intelligent life forms. Under normal circumstances, any rational ruling class would not rashly start a war without sufficient preparation. But what was interesting was that this law, which was universally followed on Earth, had no effect on Azeroth. To be exact, ever since the opening of the Dark Portal, this cursed world had been in a constant state of war. The war between the humans and the orcs had lasted for 7 to 8 years, and the eastern continent had been ravaged and devastated. However, before people could stop and take a breather, the undead scourge caused by the Lich King once again swept through the strongest human kingdom, Lord Darren. Millions of subjects were killed and turned into members of the undead army. The High Elven Kingdom was slaughtered, and the Sunwell that they were proud of was polluted. The worst was Dalaran. First, it was attacked by the undead army, then completely destroyed by the Arcarans. The losses could not be measured with money, and only large ruins were left. Leading a massive army of undead and demons, the Corruptor attacked all the way to the World Tree. In the end, the Night Elves had to pay the price of eternal life to barely escape the calamity. If you thought that was the end, you were gravely mistaken. Next, in order to expand their living space, the Horde launched a war against the natives of Kalimdor. Intelligent life, such as the Boar people, centaurs, harpies, and other intelligent life were all horribly slaughtered. On the other side, the Alliance was not idle either. The remaining nobles of Lordaeron were actively organizing to take the opportunity to reclaim their lost land and restore their former glory. Admiral Dalen did not hide her hatred for the orcs and personally led a fleet to attack the Horde stronghold. In the end, she was killed by her own daughter. As for the past few years, the Horde and the Alliance had been in constant conflict. Although there were no large-scale battles, small conflicts had never stopped. It was not until the Second War of the Shifting Sands that they shook hands and formed a united front. What was even more frightening was that they would go to the Outlands to fight Illidan and the Burning Legion. Then, they would go on an expedition to Nordsen to eliminate the Lich King. After that, there would be a direct confrontation with the legendary Wings of Death. In short, the war had never left this ancient planet. Zhang Cheng had never understood how enormous the population base and the survival rate of the civilization would have to be in order to ensure that the civilization would not deteriorate or even perish because of the war, considering the speed of the frequent wars and the gory casualties. Of course, the life and death of the natives of Azeroth had nothing to do with him. At this moment, he had already silently left the Dark Shrine and arrived inside Nagrin's Ashu, sacred mountain. He raised his head and looked at the strange creature emitting a strong light in front of him. Neru. To be precise, it was the Neru Kulii who had first come into contact with the Draenei prophet Velen. However, due to the crash of a spaceship, this powerful creature was now severely injured and on the verge of death. "What's this?" Silner raised her head in surprise, her face full of shock and awe. Through the demon hunter's unique perception, she could clearly sense the surging power in his body, and this power was so pure. A seriously injured and dying Neru, Zhang Cheng took a step forward and bowed slightly with one hand on his chest. "Hello, Kawule. Nice to meet you." "No, I'm not good at all. And after you came, I felt even worse." The shiny substance on the Neru's body kept spinning, expressing the uneasiness in its master's heart. "Oh, can you tell me why?" Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and revealed a playful smile. "Because of you, I feel darkness, evil, coldness, and madness from your heart. Without a doubt, you are the enemy of the holy light, a monster who has fallen into darkness." As he said this, the light emitted from Kuwule's body suddenly dimmed, indicating his future and fate. "Ha ha! Interesting. This is really interesting. You can actually see through my disguise? Tell me, is this an ability that every Neru has? What is its principle? Detection of thoughts? Soul? Or some kind of detection spell? Also, can you explain how Neru were born? Why do you have almost immortal lives? Even if you die, you just change your form and absorb energy from the void, then revive again and again? Zhang Cheng had no intention of hiding at all, laughing as he asked countless questions. In his eyes, the Neru's research value was second only to the Titans. After all, even Kill Jaden, the Arc-Herons, the Wings of Death, and the ancient gods, these incomparably powerful life forms, could not revive from the dead, but to the Neru, it was an innate instinct. Kawule seemed to be enraged, warning in a dignified voice, "Mortal, stop your dangerous actions. I promise that doing this will not benefit you, me, or the entire world." Hearing such childish words, Zhang Cheng could not help but laugh and wave his hand. "No, no, no. I think you're mistaken about one thing, and that is that I don't care what this world will become. In my opinion, whether it's the Burning Legion, the Titans of the Pantheon, or you Neru who are known as the emissaries of the Holy Light, there's not much difference in essence. It doesn't even matter if the entire universe is swallowed by the void. This is because light and darkness, life and death, creation and destruction are a cycle that is both opposed and dependent on each other. Even the vast and boundless universe will eventually come to an end one day, let alone a few planets and the insignificant lives and civilizations living on them. Most importantly, why should I fear the Burning Legion and the power from the distortion of time and space? Holy light, shadow, dark energy, arcane, nature, dead souls, all these magic energies belong to the original universe, and no one can destroy them forever, not even the Titans of the Pantheon. So my principle is that no matter what kind of power, it is an objective existence in essence. They are like swords and armor, and there is no distinction between good and evil. It depends on what one wants to use them for. In addition, do you think that you, who are on the verge of death, have any room to bargain in front of me? No, you are just a captive, an experimental subject that is about to be studied by me. Oh, yes, I hope that the Neru's pain nerve are not so sensitive, because in the next period of time, you may experience some more violent means. After all, I'm really curious about why you and your kind were born, and why you can constantly transform between two extreme life forms. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful Book Mobile Version Website, .com. Chapter 634. There was no doubt that a Neru was a higher life form in the universe where Azeroth was located. In its heyday, it was comparable to a demigod like Cenarius. Even the powerful demon lords of the Burning Legion had to be prepared to die if they encountered one. Unfortunately, Kawule's current state was not even 1/10 of his peak state, let alone his peak state. To be precise, he was on the verge of death. Even if no one attacked him, it would not take long for the core to exhaust its last bit of holy power and transform into a dark Neru or an entropic demon. Under such circumstances, not to mention resisting, he had already exhausted all of his energy to barely maintain his life form and prevent his death from causing terrible damage to the surrounding environment and creatures. He was completely helpless against this arrogant human before him. He could only watch as the human did whatever he wanted to do, including using violent means to cut off the shards of his body that were shining with holy light. In just a few days, poor Kawule had already exhausted the power that he had absorbed from the Orc Shaman's holy pond for hundreds of years. The shadow energy that represented the distortion of the void was constantly leaking out from the core. It was only one step away from becoming a life form that was completely opposite to the holy light. Just when he thought that he was doomed, Zhang Cheng, whose eyes were filled with a desire to explore, suddenly stopped what he was doing. He touched his chin and said to himself, "This is so interesting. Instead of calling you Neru a life form, it would be better to call you a universal phenomenon with independent thoughts. The dazzling shell is merely a storage device and a conductor of energy. The real core comes from the singularity produced by the violent conflict between light and darkness. As long as the singularity is not destroyed, the Neru will never truly die. Am I right? Mortal, you are stepping into a dangerous territory. There are some things that you should not know and study at all." Kawule warned again in a tired and weak voice. To be precise, in just a few days, he had already lost count of how many warnings and threats he had issued, but none of them had any real effect. This was because, strictly speaking, Zhang Cheng was no longer immortal. When he was in the Faerun continent, he had slaughtered the gods who had fallen to the material world and walked in the form of saints. He had taken away a large amount of divine power and divinity, and the seed in his body that belonged to the creator of the magical earth had begun to take root and sprout, gradually extending a powerful force of creation. Of course, in this process, he was not like many demigods or heroes in myths and legends who constantly strengthened their bodies to make them harder and harder to kill. On the contrary, he chose to strengthen the most essential thing in his life, his soul. In his opinion, the body was just a container, a carrier for the soul. Just like clothes, shoes, and socks, it was a part that could be replaced. But the soul was different. The soul carried memories, personality, thoughts, and knowledge. When a life-form soul was strong enough, it no longer needed a body. It could interfere with the material world with the power of the soul alone. It was just like how the titans of the pantheon had been destroyed by Sargeras, but they could still do many things as souls. Looking at this strange creature that was about to transform into a dark Neru or an entropic demon, Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. Sorry, dear Kowule. Curiosity and thirst for knowledge are human nature. Although this nature often causes extremely terrible and disastrous consequences, it also gives us a kind of courage, the courage to challenge and spy on the power of God. No, your motive is not courage at all. It's greed. It's greed that comes from the bottom of your heart. Kowule retorted loudly. What's the difference? Every intelligent creature is a collection of desires. In order to obtain food and living space, we will not hesitate to kill other life forms and even slaughter them. Although a Neru does not need food, it will cause great destruction every time it dies. I'm afraid the number of lives that have died in your hands is not much less than mine. I'm very curious. How do you maintain such a superior attitude, as if you were pure and flawless, and represent the supreme justice in the universe? Zhang Cheng's tone was full of disdain and sarcasm. A Neru represents the holy light? Represents justice? Perhaps only the brainwashed holy knights and holy light priests would believe it. Even though he wasn't sure what was going on with Neru's birth and death, there was one thing he could be sure of. These strange life forms had an ulterior motive, and their actions were very similar to the void force that used the ancient god to corrupt the star souls. The only difference was that one was light while the other was darkness. Hearing such a blatant accusation, the faint light on Kowule's body dimmed a little, and he replied with a slightly sad tone, "You don't understand how many secrets this universe has hidden. You don't even understand the meaning of our existence." "Why should I understand?" "You're mistaken about one thing. I'm not studying you to find out what the existence of a Neru means to the entire universe. I just want to find a way to use you. One last thing, I'm very sorry, but this time, you may not be able to perform the resurrection trick, because I will seal the most important part of the Neru's singularity in your core, and use it to strengthen your supreme authority." As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng directly raised his finger and shot out a dazzling, arcane energy. The next second, boom, the last ray of light that came out of Kowule's core also disappeared, and it was replaced by an entrance that connected to distorted space and time. A large amount of dark energy spread out like a tide with it as the center. In just a few seconds, the holy mountain in the hearts of the orc shamans, Washigu, was completely swallowed by darkness. Even the green grass was distorted and severely damaged. Silence, cold, darkness, death. The dead Neru had used their actions to prove just how terrifying they could become after they fell to the other side. However, Zhang Cheng was not affected by the violent impact of the energy at all. He took 2 steps forward, raised the staff high, and loudly chanted a spell. Through the power of magic, he firmly fixed Kowule in place and tore apart his thin body bit by bit. The whole process was dangerous and long. After more than an hour, the most important core part of the Neru's body was finally forcefully separated. Feeling the singularity formed by the intense intertwining of holy light and dark shadow in this fragment, A faint smile quickly appeared on Zhang Cheng's tense face. Excellent. The next thing to do is to fuse and devour. Paramount Heavenly God, are you ready? Buzz, buzz. The crystal at the top of the staff vibrated and flickered continuously, as if urging its master to hurry up and do it. It was already impatient. Genius memorized this site's address in 1 second. Mobile version of reading website. Chapter 635. You're always so thirsty. Be patient. After all, this is as important to you as a new heart. Zhang Cheng comforted the Supreme God as he moved the crystal at the top of the staff to the core of Naru's holy light. Oh no, it should be the shadow core now. The moment the two touched, a dazzling light suddenly lit up. It was as if the Supreme God had activated a crucial mechanism. In just a few seconds, the core that was still emitting endless shadow energy burst out with bright holy light. However, this holy light was not all. Half of the core was still firmly occupied by shadow energy. In a short few minutes, when the two energies intertwined and collided, a pale gray light spot that was almost invisible to the naked eye gradually appeared. There was no doubt that this little thing was Naru's body, a singularity born from the intense conflict between light and darkness. It was also equivalent to Naru's heart and soul, although it looked so small and fragile. In fact, the power it contained was not much weaker than the most powerful nuclear weapon on Earth. It might even be stronger. There was no hesitation. Zhang Cheng directly injected all the power into the staff, capturing it through the powerful energy cage. Little by little, it was pulled into the crystal at the top of the staff. Finally, it was slowly decomposed and absorbed. The originally colorless crystal was quickly dyed with a layer of gold. However, in the center of the gold, there was a small black that kept flashing. At the moment when the last step was completed, Naru's huge body that was originally floating in midair suddenly made a loud noise. Boom! All the residual energy that had lost control quickly spread in all directions in this violent explosion. Not only did the wreckage of the spaceship, which was regarded as a sacred mountain by the orcs, directly fall apart, but even the ground under their feet was torn apart by the terrible energy storm. The violent collapse of the Earth's crust not only shocked the broken Draenei, who were close by, but even the orcs in the north could not help but become restless. What was even more terrifying was that the two impacts of shadow energy caused a huge pollution to the ecological environment of the entire Nagrand area. Much of the originally emerald green grass had been corroded into a dark purple color, and the animals had also become deformed under the corrosion of the shadow energy. If anyone ate their meat, although they would not be poisoned to death on the spot, it would not take long for a series of side effects to occur. Even the elementals of the Throne of Elements were unable to escape this calamity. Many of the elementals changed their forms under the invasion of the shadow energy and began to violently attack anyone who approached. The unlucky Magan orcs did not even have time to react to what was happening before their homes were flooded by the huge waves created by the violent water elementals. Pain and death quickly shrouded the sky above the most suitable land for survival in the Outland. However, Zhang Cheng didn't pay any attention to the terrifying disaster that he had inadvertently caused. Instead, he floated in mid-air using the power of his spell technique, patiently waiting for the supreme heavenly god power to complete its upgrade. As for the fragments of Ku Wulei's body, most of them were scattered in the explosion and fell into the bottomless, twisted void. Only the core and a few larger pieces were collected by him. In any case, the Naru's body was a near-perfect energy storage device and conductor. It was very suitable for creating powerful magical items or divine weapons. Time ticked by slowly, just as the demonized Silner spread her wings and flew over from afar. Wanting to ask what was going on, the supreme heavenly god, Dream, which had fallen into silence, released a golden light that was as bright as the sun. Then it released an overwhelming amount of dark shadows. The two switched back and forth frequently for half a minute before finally calming down. Sensing the astonishing power contained within the top-tier crystal, Zhang Cheng's lips curled up slightly. What does the Nara taste? Excellent. Great master. When can we devour another one? The supreme heavenly god power used a method similar to the crystal's resonance to speak. It was clear that after devouring the Naru, its power and intelligence had both been greatly enhanced. Don't worry. In this world that is on the verge of destruction, there are many creatures named Naru. Once they complete their mission, I promise to capture all of them for you to eat. Zhang Cheng chuckled as he gave his promise. Then what's your next plan? The supreme heavenly god power probed with excitement. It's very simple. Before the Alliance and the Horde react, we'll kill Doomsday Lord Karzak first. I believe that the extraterritorial Queen Illidan will be very happy to do it herself. Don't you think so? Speaking of this, Zhang Cheng deliberately paused and looked at the female demon hunter who flew to his side. Silner was shocked at first, but she immediately nodded immediately. That's right. Lady Illidan will never let go of any opportunity to severely damage the army. Moreover, Doomsday Lord Karzak opened the door of darkness. It's obvious that he's following the orders of Deceiver Kill Jaden to take revenge on us. According to Lady Illidan's personality, she will definitely respond. Then what are we waiting for? Let's return to the Dark Temple. I believe that Illidan will make the right choice. Also, where's my apprentice? Could it be that he was killed by Galan, who is wandering in the wild? Zhang Cheng raised his head and glanced at the ground in the distance that hadn't collapsed yet. He discovered that Karla Cape wasn't nearby. No, that poor Tauren is still alive. According to your request, I took him a hunt for a few days. Right now, he's roasting taboo sheep near the grassland. The female demon hunter pointed to a wisp of smoke rising into the sky in the north. Oh, how did he perform? Hearing that his apprentice was not dead, Zhang Cheng touched his chin with interest. Very good, especially the degree of shamelessness. It's an eye-opener. A smile appeared on Silner's face. Because under Zhang Cheng's devil training, Karla Cape was no longer an apprentice, but a sinister, cunning mage who was good at sneak attacks and counter-sneak attacks. Not only was this pirate cow able to use frost, fire, and arcane magic to perfection, she had also learned some shameless tactics without anyone teaching her. If the opponent's size was smaller than his, he would dash forward with a flash, raise his hooves, and use a war trample to make the enemy fall into a state of dizziness. Then, he would follow up with a set of icicles, fireballs, and arcane missiles. If the enemy didn't die after that, he would use his heavy staff to smash the target's head until it bled. However, if the opponent was bigger than him, he would choose to keep a distance and continuously attack the target's legs until the opponent tested his ability to chase him. Then, he would slowly turn around and kill him bit by bit. Most importantly, Karla Cape was not as simple and honest as ordinary Torrents. Instead, he had learned a lot of shameless tricks from the pirates. For example, he would spit at the opponent's face during battle, use his hooves to raise sand to attack the opponent's eyes, use his sharp horns to stab people, and so on. Anyway, there was nothing that he couldn't do. It was just like the old saying that a tree without bark would definitely die, and a shameless person would be invincible. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful Book Mobile Version Website.com. Chapter 636. Hundreds of portals have been set up near the Hellfire Peninsula. Thousands of demons belonging to the Burning Legion were gathering from all corners of the universe. Because the Outlands didn't have the protection of the Titans like Azeroth, there was no need to worry about interference and restrictions. In just a few days, more than 100,000 demons have been summoned. Some of them attacked the Hellfire walls and fortresses controlled by Illidan's fell orcs, while others entered the Cursed Lands, trying to launch a third invasion of Azeroth. As for the Doomsday Lord Kazak, he was now on the mountain named Kill Jaden's throne in the north. He was personally in charge of the war in the Outlands, while his deputy Krull was in charge of attacking the Watchtower, preparing to launch a full-scale invasion of the empty eastern continent, fighting on two fronts without any terrain or strategic advantage. Apart from the Burning Legion, there was no other force that dared to be so arrogant. However, with the absolute advantage of quality and quantity, the entire plan was proceeding smoothly. At least until now, they hadn't encountered any real obstacles. The fell orcs created by Illidan using Magtheridon's blood were all suppressed around the strong fortresses and walls. In time, they would be torn to pieces by the endless stream of demons. Even part of Krull's army had passed through the Twilight Forest and was heading straight for Stormwind City. If the Alliance couldn't complete the defense within 3 days, the entire Stormwind Kingdom might fall. Although it sounded like the situation was going well, Kazak didn't let his guard down. This was because he knew from Kill Jaden that the home of the Dreadlord had been turned into cosmic dust by the traitor Illidan's surprise attack, so it was hard to guarantee that the other party wouldn't replicate a similar situation in the Outlands. After all, the Outlands were almost drained during the Orcs' invasion. Whether it was the ecological environment or the Earth's crust, it was extremely fragile. It was completely possible that the spectacular scene of Nazriz's destruction would repeat itself. This was also why Kill Jaden didn't directly descend and use his unparalleled power to crush Illidan's stronghold, the Black Temple. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but he didn't dare to. Ever since Archimonde the Defiler had been killed by the Night Elves under the World Tree, his actions had become much more cautious, afraid that he would follow in the footsteps of the former. Furthermore, Kill Jaden had recently come up with a new plan, which was to use the massive magic power of the Sunwell to allow his powerful body to pass through the protection set up by the Titans and enter Azeroth to obtain the unawakened astral soul. And this time, the Night Elves no longer had a world tree bestowed with power by the dragon aspect to detonate the terrifying energy impact. Of course, Kazak did not know about these ambitious plans for the time being. He was standing on the top of the mountain and looking down at the intense battle on the Hellfire Peninsula. He did not even turn his head to look at the busy art technician behind him. When will our fell reaver be completed? Great Doomsday Lord. According to the current progress, it will take at least 4 more days. Technician Arg hurriedly stopped his work and replied. Right in front of him, there was a huge object completely made of fell iron standing next to the camp. Its height was almost the same as Kazak's, maybe even a little higher. Whether it was its huge iron fist or its feet that could flatten a Kodo, it could easily tear apart the strongest fortifications. 2 days. I'll only give you 2 days. If you can't get these big guys to move after 2 days, I'll stuff you into the barrel of the fell cannon and shoot you out. Kazak waved the huge magic weapon in his hand and threatened. Just when Technician Arg wanted to try and buy some time, a familiar figure suddenly descended from the sky at an extremely fast speed. The 2 blades that were glowing with green light instantly beheaded dozens of demon guards who did not have time to react. Illidan. Kazak undoubtedly recognized the newcomer, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He could not believe that the other party dared to come to his territory alone. Oof. Long time no see, Doomsday Lord. I didn't expect Kill Jaden to send you to kill me. The demon hunter sneered and greeted him. Only you? Kazak narrowed his eyes and looked around, trying to find more enemies lying in ambush nearby. He was not one of those brainless abyss lords. He understood that a sinister and cunning guy like the other party would not appear in front of him unprepared. What are you afraid? Illidan raised Azanatha's blade high and made a provocative gesture. When Kazak saw this, he immediately swung his huge 2-handed sword and smashed it down. At the same time, he roared fiercely. Afraid? I'll be afraid. Lowly Night Elf. You'll pay for your arrogance. Ha ha. Come on. Let me see what you're capable of. Illidan laughed and soared into the air. With the help of the airflow, she nimbly circled behind the Doomsday Lord and cut 2 deep wounds on his huge wings. Puff! Hot blood suddenly splattered everywhere. Go to hell. The injured Kazak became ferocious. He raised his hand and shot out several powerful shadow energy. Several gone Erg laborers who couldn't dodge in time were torn to pieces. As the saying goes, when immortals fight, mortals suffer. In the Doomsday Lord's attack, almost all the unlucky ones who were involved in it became incomplete corpses and minced meat without exception. No one noticed that behind the cliff of Kill Jaden's throne, a young human was standing, concentrating on guiding the magic energy. Including the entire mountain and the burning legion on the front line of the Hellfire Peninsula, They were all covered by this powerful strategic magic. Without a doubt, he was none other than Zhang Cheng, who wanted to give the enemy a big gift before leaving. Due to his interference, the Dark Portal was a few months earlier than the original historical process. If ignored, it was likely to lead to a series of chain reactions. For example, the flying fortress controlled by Kel Thuzad Naxxramas would soon launch a new round of attacks. In order to ensure that Chromie wouldn't find trouble with him, Zhang Cheng felt that it was best to weaken the Burning Legion's power in the Outlands before leaving. Accompanied by the sounds of fierce collisions from the battle below, he quickly completed all the preparations for the complicated magic ritual. He gently raised his staff, Supreme Authority. In a short moment, dazzling golden light spewed out from the crystal at the top, like a net that enveloped almost a quarter of the Hellfire Peninsula. This pure holy light was like a laser, directly cutting those demons who weren't strong enough into pieces. The stronger demons were even more miserable. They were like fat pigs that had fallen into a steel net. The more they struggled, the deeper they were embedded. Accompanied by the intense burning sensation, thousands of demons began to scream and wail in extreme pain. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful Book Mobile Version Website, .com. Chapter 637. Holy Light Above. Look, what's that? A human sentinel standing on high ground shouted loudly. Because the Glory Fort was very close to the Hellfire Fortress, it had suffered a lot of attacks from demons these days, so it had always been on high alert. Fortunately, the overwhelming demon army didn't treat this place as their main target. Otherwise, this fortification that had been built after the Second War with the Beastmen wouldn't even last 2 days. However, after the disappearance of Turalian and Illyria Windrunner, the highest commander of the Glory Fort, Donis Tolbane, didn't dare to let his guard down. Not only did he increase the number of guards, he also ordered the mages of the army to reinforce and repair the damaged walls in order to deal with a possible siege at any time. Under this sentry shout, many people hurriedly climbed up the sentry tower and looked into the distance. They quickly discovered the golden energy net that covered the sky and the tens of thousands of demons that had died in the net. Heavens, this is the power of holy light? Another paladin who looked like a military officer opened his mouth wide, an expression of disbelief appearing on his face. As a believer and user of holy light, he had never seen anyone who could use holy light in such a precise and complicated way. It had to be known that holy light was an extremely pure and exclusive power. The user could only control its intensity. For example, when healing, one could make holy light gentler. When attacking, one could make it violent and aggressive. Only a few high-rank paladins and priests had the ability to control the external form of holy light. But now, someone had actually condensed holy light into a huge and precise net that covered a quarter of the Hellfire Peninsula. This wasn't something a mortal could do, at least among the defenders of the Glory Fort. No one had ever heard of anyone who could use holy light to such a degree. Even Neru would at most increase the intensity of holy light when attacking the enemy. The bearded Donna's Trollbane hesitated for a moment before quickly turning to the Griffin administrator on the flight platform and shouting, "Immediately send a team of pilots to see what's going on. Remember, don't get too close. Our troops and supplies are already low enough. We can't let any more accidents happen." "Understood, sir. Flight team, take off. Maintain formation." At the same time, in the Runeforge camp on the throne of Kil Jaden in the north, Doomsday Lord Karzak desperately released the surging evil energy in his body, trying to break free from the shackles of the energy net. But unfortunately, how could the demon hunter Illidan let go of such a rare opportunity? She quickly brandished Azzinoth and heavily injured this powerful enemy in just a few minutes. Especially the chest that had been torn apart by the violent attack. It made one's scalp go numb. The heart that was emitting green light was constantly spurting out green, viscous liquid. There was no doubt that these liquids were highly concentrated dark energy and were absolutely dangerous. If it weren't for the holy light net, it would have exploded under the intense vibrations, just like how Hell's roar had killed the Lord of the Abyss, Manoroth. Looking at the dying Doomsday Lord on the ground, Illidan said in a rather emotional tone, "What a pity. This was not a distorted space-time. Otherwise, you won't even have a chance to revive. Despicable night elves. Even though you've won this time. But don't be complacent. It won't be long before the Deceiver sends another commander to replace me. The Burning Legion is invincible, and you don't have much time left." Kazak roared with two eyes full of anger and hatred. "Oh, is that so? Then let's wait and see." Illidan put away her weapon and raised her head to shout at Zhang Cheng, who was standing at the top of the cliff. "According to the agreement, he's yours now. No matter what you want to do, I suggest you move faster, or else." Before he could finish his words, the huge portal not far away suddenly began to flicker with a dazzling light, and the vibration of space became more and more intense. Anyone who wasn't an idiot would know that a powerful abyssal had already entered the teleportation channel and would soon appear on the Hellfire Peninsula. "Damn it, I hate this endless entanglement." Zhang Cheng cursed in a low voice and quickly used the long-distance teleportation magic to come in front of the Doomsday Lord. Before the latter could say anything, Silner, who was following closely behind, rushed up like a female leopard pouncing on the huge heart, opening her mouth and biting it. Accompanied by a painful roar, the huntress began to bite and devour, continuously absorbing a huge amount of energy from Kazak's body, and even his soul was not spared. The Doomsday Lord was not a demon in the ordinary sense, but a powerhouse in the Burning Legion, second only to Archimonde and Kil'jaeden. In just a few seconds, the evil energy tattoo on the upper half of Silner's body, which was used to bind the demon's soul, showed signs of collapse, and she began to rapidly demonize under the impact of Kazak's powerful soul. "She can't bear it at all. She'll die." Illidan saw this scene and gave her own judgment expressionlessly. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders indifferently. "Don't worry. Do you think I'll carry out such a dangerous experiment without any preparation? No, I've already expected all the possible accidents, not to mention that this can't even be considered an accident." After saying that, he raised the Supreme Authority and stabbed it into the female elf's chest. Puff! Although the demonized skin had a very strong defense, under the piercing of the elementium ingot metal, it still went straight into the heart. The magic patterns on the surface of the staff suddenly lit up with green light, and the evil energy that exceeded the upper limit of the body was continuously absorbed by the staff. Kazak's soul was also torn and devoured. The whole process lasted about 3 to 5 minutes, and then Silner fell to the ground with a plop. She slowly returned to the appearance of an elf, gasping for breath. "How do you feel?" Zhang Cheng asked as he pulled out the Supreme Authority. "Ugh," Silner groaned and struggled to get up from the ground. "It hurts a little, but I can feel that my body is full of power, great power." As she said this, the puncture on her body quickly healed, and not even a trace of a scar was left. "Not bad indeed. You are now the second most powerful demon hunter in this world, second only to me. How about it? Are you interested in joining Illidar again?" Illidan probed with interest. "Sorry, my lord. I already have a new person to serve." Silner refused without hesitation. It was not that she did not want to continue fighting the demons of the Burning Legion, but that she had decided to leave this world and follow her new master to another world, a perfect world without hatred, pain, and worries. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful book mobile version website.com. Chapter 638. You're leaving? Illidan seemed to have noticed something, so he turned his head and asked meaningfully. "That's right. To be exact, this should be our last meeting in the Outland. The next time we meet, I'm afraid it will be on another planet in the distant universe." Zhang Cheng didn't try to hide his intention to leave and openly admitted it. What's more, killing the Doomsday Lord Karzak was not necessarily not a sign of allegiance to the Outland King, indicating that he had already fought with the Legion to the death. Otherwise, it was hard to guarantee that the other party wouldn't associate it with betrayal and leaking secrets. Don't underestimate Illidan Stormridge's vigilance. In order to ensure that the raid could be carried out smoothly, she didn't even tell anyone about her plan. No matter if it was the seemingly loyal Vashj or Kale, that's who controlled a large number of blood elves, they were all excluded. It could be seen that he, who had experienced many betrayals, did not have the slightest bit of trust in his bones. Why are you leaving? Are you not satisfied with the treatment I gave you? Illidan pretended to be puzzled and probed. Zhang Chung smiled and shook his head. No, of course not. The reason I'm leaving is very simple. You may face a setback, a destiny that belongs to you, and I'm not going to participate in it, and I don't want to be killed as your subordinate or accomplice. The most important thing is that this setback can pave the way for your next plan. Once it is changed, the future will become unpredictable. Do you want to destroy the victory you're destined to get? You mean, I'll die? Illidan raised her eyebrows in surprise. She wasn't a fool. Naturally, she could hear the hint in the words. For people like you and me, death is not the end. Instead, it's a short rest in the long journey of life. During the rest, we can sit down and sum up our previous gains and losses and think about how we should go in the future. What do you think? Zhangqing didn't answer the question and blinked. For Illidan, who had absorbed a large amount of evil energy and demon souls, she was no longer an ordinary night elf, but a pure demon from the inside out. Therefore, as long as they weren't killed in the distorted void, they wouldn't really die. Their souls would just leave their bodies and wait to be resurrected. It wasn't a big deal. You're always so mysterious, but one day I'll figure out where you come from. By the way, where do you plan to go next? As she spoke, Illidan casually killed a demon guard that rushed out of the portal. The sharp double blades easily tore apart the chest of the unlucky creature, and its soul and power were all absorbed by the demon hunter in an instant. Zhangcheng was not to be outdone. He raised his supreme god power and shot out 2 balls of golden holy light. With a boom, more than 30 demons were blown to pieces. He then smiled and replied, "If nothing goes wrong, I should be going to Farala's in the Kalimdor continent to visit Syndera in the Mallet of Misfortune. Moreover, you gave me a bottle of water from the Well of Eternity. I really need a magic node, and the Mallet of Misfortune happens to be a good choice. You want to create a second Sunwell in the Mallet of Misfortune? I have to admit, you're a very courageous human. You actually want to do such a thing in the territory of the Night Elves. But unfortunately, my dear brother and former clansman won't allow you to do so. I guarantee that if you trigger a strong magic wave, an army of Night Elves will be at the city in 3 days at most." Illidan pursed her lips and reminded him in a sarcastic tone. No one knew better than him how wary and disgusted the druids and Night Elf priestesses were of arcane magic. After the ancient war, if it weren't for these damn guys stopping him, he would have created a new Well of Eternity on the original site. Then, Azeroth would have an inexhaustible source of energy. Don't worry, by the time they react, I'll be long gone. Zhang Cheng's eyes showed undisguised contempt and playfulness. In fact, he didn't want to create a sunwell. He wanted to use the water from the Well of Eternity to trigger a violent vibration in the magic nodes, and then use this opportunity to create an energy source similar to the sunwell in the depths of his soul. Then, he would use divinity to transform different types of energy and permanently change the nature of his soul. Of course, as the Mallet of Misfortune that triggered the violent vibration in the magic nodes of Azeroth, there was no doubt that it would be razed to the ground by the terrifying energy explosion. Perhaps the entire terrain and ecological environment of Farala's would be changed as a result. Therefore, when this matter was over, he would definitely be in the top 10 of the Druids and Night Elves wanted list, provided that they found out who did it. In that case, let's part ways here. After all, I don't want to fight with the guy who came out of the portal. As soon as he finished speaking, Illidan suddenly spread her wings and jumped down from the top of Kill, Jaden's throne. Using the airflow, she swept across the low altitude and disappeared at the end of the Hellfire Peninsula. Less than 10 seconds after she left, the largest portal suddenly exploded with a bang, and a red-skinned Irida warlock walked out from it. Who? Who killed the Doomsday, Lord Karzak? Who dares to obstruct the army's plan? The demon roared and shot out bolts of dark energy lightning, plowing the surrounding camp from top to bottom. The terrible energy shock caused many mountain peaks to splatter and roll down from high places, making a violent rumbling sound. Kill! Jaden sent out a powerful Darksider. Looks like we should retreat. Zhang Cheng had no intention of fighting the opponent head-on. He pulled Silner, who was beside him, and escaped through teleportation magic. It was important to know that he was able to kill Karzak in one blow mainly because Illidan attracted his attention and he attacked from behind. If it was a direct confrontation, he might not be able to do anything to a demon lord with such powerful vitality. As for the spellcasters among the Irida demons, they were even more difficult to deal with. Even though the leader of the Draenei, Prophet Velen, had always emphasized that the Irida demons who had surrendered to the Dark Titan Sargeras had long fallen into darkness, they had actually obtained a large amount of forbidden knowledge, and their strength had long surpassed their former brethren. About a dozen elite Irida warlocks could suppress a group of wizards formed by Archmage Dalaran. After a while of indiscriminate bombardment, the Irida demons found no signs of enemies around them and quickly stopped casting spells. They began to shout loudly for the unlucky survivors to repair the portal and continue to summon armies from other parts of the universe. He didn't even notice that a goblin zeppelin covered in an invisibility spell had silently passed through the door of darkness not far to the south. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com, Wonderful Book Mobile Version Website, .com. Chapter 639. After passing through the endless sea, the Goblin Zeppelin, which had been repaired and refurbished many times, finally passed through the barren lands. It followed the Thousand Needles all the way to the west and entered Feralas, which was filled with dense forests. When it passed by Emo Sacker's camp, it attracted the attention of many Torns below. They all raised their heads and stared with wide eyes, their faces full of disbelief. This was because these peaceful big guys saw a male of their kind standing on the deck. She was wearing a pink dress and holding a hammer-like staff. She was chanting a spell loudly, forming a strong, intersecting airflow near the propellers, propelling the huge object to fly at high speed. Of course, this weirdly dressed Tauren was none other than Zhang Cheng's apprentice, the first Tauren mage of Azeroth, Kara Cape. As for the so-called pink dress, it was actually an apprentice's robe, but because Torns were much larger than humans, it only reached their knees. From afar, it looked like a dress, a bunch of country bumpkins who haven't seen the world. Kara Cape stood on the deck and spat at his fellow Torrents. If it was a few months ago, he would have felt a little ashamed, but now his skin was thicker than a city wall. As long as he could live peacefully, he didn't care about dignity or face. Stop talking nonsense. Continue to maintain a steady output of magic. If you can't take down the mallet of misfortune before nightfall, I'll peel off your skin and make a cushion for myself. Onyxia, in her human form, kicked the Torrens' butt and threatened. As you wish, Your Highness. Karla Cape made no attempt to argue, but bowed with an honest and gentlemanly air. It wasn't that he had lost the courage to fight, but that he already knew who he couldn't offend on this ship, and who he could bargain with. The Princess of the Black Dragon was definitely the former. Although he didn't think that she would really peel off his skin to make a cushion for herself, he knew that he would definitely suffer. As a Tauren mage who prided himself on being smart and flexible, he wasn't stupid enough to put himself in a dangerous position just for the sake of a momentary slip of the tongue. Seeing a flash of cunning in Carla's eyes, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but smile and shake his head. All right, don't bully my apprentice. He's going to bring a clear stream to this world in the future. Think about it. How spectacular would it be to see a group of Tauren mages active on the battlefield? I'm really looking forward to it. Anticipation? I think that when he returns to Thunder Cliff, he will definitely make those stupid bulls run around in circles and then take the opportunity to seek benefits for himself. Onyxia rolled her eyes in annoyance. Over the past few days, she had seen how Karla Cape used despicable means to defeat one opponent after another. That style of using everything in battle was simply like a scoundrel living in the countryside. It did not fit the image of a mage at all. If Dalaran and the other old men saw this towering mage, they would probably pass out on the spot from anger. Ha ha! Isn't that what I'm looking forward to? Like I said before, diversity is a necessary condition for a race to survive, develop, and even evolve. The Taurens are really too conservative. It's just right to inject new vitality into them. Also, we're about to reach the mallet of misfortune. I suggest that you find a place to hide. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if the night elves or druids find you. Zhang Cheng stroked his chin thoughtfully and reminded her. What are you afraid? The Onyx Dragon Princess proudly raised her chin and questioned. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. No, I'm not afraid. I'm just avoiding unnecessary trouble. The ancient city of Aresilas was secretly built by a group of high elf mages 12,000 years ago to preserve Queen Azhar's precious arcane secrets. Therefore, I have enough reason to believe that the night elves and druids have been keeping an eye on this place to prevent any accidents from happening. I don't understand. Onyxia subconsciously frowned. It's very simple. If a human mage enters the mallet of misfortune, these spies won't care too much. However, if a powerful black dragon enters the mallet of misfortune, they'll immediately sound the horn of war. Most importantly, Feralas has always had an entrance connected to the Emerald Dream. A while ago, there were even green dragons. Are you sure you're ready to face the wrath of the green dragon army? Zhang Cheng smirked and explained in a gloating tone. It couldn't be helped. Black dragons were just that good at attracting hatred. Although he didn't think that the nightmare green dragons would remember the terrible disaster caused by the fall of Deathwing, there was no harm in being careful. Onyxia narrowed her eyes as if she was weighing the pros and cons. After a full 2 or 3 minutes, she spread her wings and transformed into a huge black dragon. She directly tore through the mountain and created a cave large enough to accommodate herself. Obviously, she had used the potion to awaken the power of the earth that the Titans had bestowed upon the black dragons. Perhaps it was still far from the terrifying power that Deathwing had displayed during the great cataclysm that changed the entire landscape of Azeroth, but it was more than enough to create a magnitude 7 or 8 earthquake. Kulo-Kelba, my child, you go with her. Remember, no matter what happens in the next few days, don't act rashly. When everything is over, I will summon you through the contract, understand? Zhang Cheng turned around and said to the other dragon that was lying on the deck and dozing off out of boredom. Understood, father. Kulo-Kelba nodded lightly and jumped down from the airship and went into the huge cave below the mountain. After sending off these 2 troublemakers, Zhang Cheng immediately walked to the bow of the ship and asked the female demon hunter next to him, You'll be able to see your cousin soon. How do you feel? Silner smiled bitterly and sighed as she replied, To be honest, I'm not very sure if I'm feeling joy or fear. Although we're all branches of the High Elves, after more than 10,000 years of separation, I'm afraid it'll be difficult to recognize each other. Moreover, based on the aesthetics of the High Elves, I'm almost in the extremely ugly category. Ugly? Zhang Cheng looked up and down at the enchanting figure of the female elf, as well as her exotic, demonic features. He stretched out his right hand and shook his head as he pinched her chin. No, my dear, you're not ugly at all. On the contrary, in my eyes, you're extremely beautiful. You're the perfect embodiment of true magical technology and biological technology. You're an exquisite work of art. Only very few people who truly know how to appreciate your beauty can appreciate it. Haha, I should feel honored, shouldn't I, master? Silner shrugged, rather helplessly. After such a long time together, she was almost very clear about what kind of person she was loyal to. Furthermore, her definition of many things was completely different from that of ordinary people, especially when it came to the topic of beauty. If she remembered correctly, she seemed to have heard this word more than 2 months ago, and it was used on a monster that hatched from a giant cocoon. Chapter 640. There was no doubt that Feralas was a very unique place. Due to the abundance of magical energy, the plants here seemed to have eaten Jinkala, crazily covering every inch of the land. There was no end to the greenery that was brimming with life. With the lush vegetation, there were naturally many herbivores. With many herbivores, there were naturally many carnivores as well. Over time, a huge food chain effect was formed. Even from high up in the sky, one could still clearly see the legendary giant bears and wolves in the forest. There were even strange, magical creatures like the fairy dragon. Everything originated from the magic node in the center of the ancient city of Erethrus. The ogres, who were very sensitive to magic, also noticed that this place was different. They invaded and occupied the northern region of the Mallet of Misfortune, wanting to use the surrounding magical energy to rebuild their once glorious civilization. It was important to note that before the Burning Legion discovered the orcs' homeland of Draenor, there had been two powerful local civilizations. One of them was the epic civilization created by the Crowmen based on crystal technology, while the other was the magical civilization created by the ogres. It was said that the Ogre Empire at its peak had mastered magical technology that was far more advanced and destructive than the human magical kingdom of Dalaran. But now, they were nothing more than a bunch of foolish and greedy bandits, crazily plundering everything that had magical powers. They even blocked the only path that connected to the desolate land in the north, robbing the passing caravans and adventurers. When the airship Zhangcheng was slowly landed beside the central arena of the Mallet of Misfortune, the dozens of ogres who had followed behind finally couldn't help but attack. Ha ha, smash them. Go. I like to hear the screams of our prey before they die. Food. They must have brought a lot of food. Accompanied by a frenzied roar, these blue fatty swarmed forward, completely unaware of how dangerous and deadly the person standing on the airship was. Before Zhangcheng could even make a move, Carla Cape was the first to chant a spell, shooting out a scorching fireball. With a boom, the head of the unlucky ogre at the front was blasted into minced meat. It was obvious that he preferred powerful fire magic compared to ice magic, which was mainly used for control. In particular, the terrifying energy released when the pyroblast hit the enemy gave him an indescribable sense of comfort. I'm sorry, guys. Although I don't have any prejudice against ogres, you've clearly made the wrong choice. Silner gracefully pulled out her blade made of dark energy and jumped down from the deck, easily dodging the ogre's heavy two-handed axes, hammers, and wooden clubs. She slashed open the ogre's neck, letting the blood clog the ogre's trachea and suffocate it to death. The huntress had already absorbed the most powerful force from Doomlord Karzak, so killing these ogres who liked to crush their opponents with brute force was not a problem at all. To be more precise, more than 30 ogre warriors and mages had all perished in less than 5 minutes. 2/3 of them had been killed by the elves, while the other third had been killed by Carla Cape's sinister sneak attacks. One of the more pitiful fellows even had his little brother crushed by a cow's hoof. He knelt on the ground and kept howling in pain until his head was smashed by a hammer-like heavy staff. After the short battle, Zhangcheng calmly left the deck of the airship and walked straight to the west entrance. Teacher, where are we going next? Carla Cape came closer and scratched his head, pretending to be simple and honest. To the center of the magic nodes, of course, and to see the summoned demon, Imotar. I'm curious how powerful this demon is that it could be continuously whipped for thousands or even tens of thousands of years. As he spoke, Zhangcheng passed through the exquisite stone arch at the corner and came to the west side of the Hammer of Misfortune, which was full of animated plants and arcane life. Looking at the huge white crystal tower in front of the square, he couldn't help but touch his chin and murmur to himself, "Energy binding? What an interesting technique." It seems that the High Elves' research on arcane magic 10,000 years ago was far more advanced than I thought. Dear teacher, are you sure you want to go near the crystal tower? I feel that the arcane life forms around us are very unstable. If they suddenly explode, I'm afraid that no life within dozens of meters will survive, Carla Cape cautioned carefully. Zhangcheng turned around and glanced at this seemingly honest but cunning minotaur. He smiled and shook his head. No, my apprentice. These arcane life forms are not as dangerous as you think. I should have taught you before that the most important thing to deal with elemental life forms is to break down their stable energy structure. Now that the test has come, go and get rid of these annoying little things. Don't worry, if you die, I will collect your corpse. I'm going alone. Carla Cape's eyes widened, feeling as if he had been cheated. Because from a certain point of view, this was no different from throwing away one's life. This was because arcane life forms were not like fire, earth, or water elemental life forms that could only use their innate strength to fight. Unless they were powerful to a certain extent, they would not have high intelligence. However, from the moment arcane life forms were born, they would form 1 or 2 magic circuits in their bodies that were filled with energy. This meant that they could release a series of spells like arcane missiles, flash, arcane explosion, chain lightning, and so on. Moreover, the power of these spells was not something that ordinary mages could compare to. Carla Cape's legs began to tremble at the thought of being attacked by several arcane life forms that had similar spell-casting power as him. If he had a choice, he would rather go to the Outlands and deal with the gigantic split-hoofed bulls than risk his life against arcane life forms. Haha. Yes, you're going alone. However, considering your strength, I've decided to give you a little help. With that, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Instantly, a violet force field shield enveloped the Minotaur's body. Carla Cape closed his eyes and felt the structure of the shield. He cried out in surprise. It's an arcane defensive shield. That's right. However, this shield can only absorb a limited amount of damage. Once it reaches its limit, it will shatter on the spot. Remember, use your brain to avoid the enemy's attacks as much as possible. Otherwise, I guarantee that this shield won't last more than 5 minutes. Also, I will be paying a visit to the last ruler of the High Elves, Prince Tozdrin. You had best deal with all the crystal towers before I return. As the last word left his mouth, a malicious smile appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. He lightly patted the Minotaur's shoulder, completely ignoring the panic and fear in his eyes. Please remember the domain name of this book, .com. Wonderful Bookhouse. Com. Chapter 641. The central library of the Mallet of Misfortune was where the last survivors of the High Elves gathered. Of course, like many organizations that had reached the end of their road, Syndra was also facing a huge threat and trouble. Not to mention the ogres that occupied the northern district and claimed that they were going to split the land and build a new country. The satyrs that were accidentally summoned in the eastern district were already quite a headache. In addition, after more than 10,000 years of energy extraction, the energy in a mortal's body was also gradually drying up. In order to prevent the magic addiction in his body from getting out of control, the crazy Prince Tozdrin even ordered a massacre of his people under his rule. So far, less than 60 people were lucky enough to survive. Most of them were either mages who helped to extract the demon's energy or librarians who were responsible for keeping the precious knowledge in the huge library. When Zhang Cheng stepped into the central area of the ancient city of Aresalas, dozens of elves immediately stopped what they were doing and looked up at the 2 intruders with vigilant eyes. After a full minute, one of the men frowned and asked, "Who are you? How did you bypass the magic barrier and enter this sacred library?" Maybe it's a little rude to answer like this, but I still want to say it. It doesn't matter who we are. What matters is that from now on, everything here will belong to me. Zhang Cheng did not hide the purpose of his visit at all, and a malicious smile appeared on his face. His heart had long been so dark that even if he destroyed a world, he would still be indifferent. So no matter how talented these survivors of the High Elves were, and how much precious knowledge they had preserved, they could not save themselves from the fate of imminent destruction. Arrogant human, do you know who you are talking to? The man who spoke just now had a mixture of arcane and dark energy in his eyes. It seemed that he wanted to cast a spell to teach Zhang Cheng a lesson. But Zhang Cheng did not give him a chance to show off. Without turning his head, he ordered, "Silner, kill them all for me." "As you wish, master." The female demon hunter did not say a word and rushed forward. Before the man could react, she raised her sword and stabbed it into his heart. Just as the others reacted and began to counterattack, she suddenly activated the sacrificial aura. Instantly, a large ring of burning flames formed around her body, severely burning the hands of the mages and at the same time interrupting the chanting of the spell. Amidst the screams and wails, Silner effortlessly killed 7 high elf mages. However, the main reason why they were so relaxed was that these mages hadn't participated in a real battle for too long. They hadn't cast a single defensive spell since the beginning. Apart from that, the Demon Hunter's ability to restrain spellcasters also played a huge role. Looking at these corpses lying in pools of blood, Zhang Qing's expression didn't change at all. He took down the ancient books that recorded all kinds of knowledge, experience, and knowledge from the bookshelves and flipped through them. Among them, the books related to magic, alchemy, and item manufacturing were shrunk and thrown into the pouch that he carried with him. The books about history, geography, and folklore were put back in their original places. Needless to say, he was plundering the systematic and comprehensive knowledge system that the High Elves kept in this library. However, before this blatant robbery was even a third of the way through, Prince Tozdrin, who was wielding either a dagger or a dagger, rushed over from the distance at breakneck speed. Through the unique perception of a demon hunter, Silner discovered the little secret in the prince's body. She immediately raised the corner of her mouth and teased in a playful tone. "This is the guy you keep mentioning? The level of dark energy in his body is almost higher than that of many demons. Isn't that normal? If it were anyone else, they would inevitably become like this after extracting energy from demons for 12,000 years. But what makes me curious is that with so much dark energy, his body and soul didn't turn into a demon. He must have used some interesting techniques. Zhang Cheng explained while stroking his chin. "Is indeed interesting. Do you need me to keep him alive?" Silner asked in an uncertain tone. No need. These things are not of much use to me anymore. Hurry up and kill all the elves in this library, and then we will go to the magic node in the west and start the corresponding preparations." After saying that, Zhang Cheng did not look up at Prince Tozdrin, who was rushing toward him. He continued to flip through the books that were piled up like a mountain. It had to be said that the High Elf Queen Azhar's order to build this treasure house to store knowledge was indeed a wise move. It ensured that even if arcane power had been cut off among the Night Elves for tens of thousands of years, they could still rise rapidly in a short period of time. In the Great Cataclysm, after Malfurion's storm rage removed the arcane ban on his own kind, Syndra quickly used the resources at hand to build a sizable mage army. But unfortunately, this last haven of the High Elves was now ushering in the prelude of destruction. "Go to hell, despicable intruder. I will use your blood as a sacrifice to my dead brethren." With an angry roar, Prince Tozdrin's hands emitted a strong magical wave as he released an arcane attack in front of him. Asterisk bang! Asterisk Silner was directly sent flying by the powerful impact and slammed into the bookshelf behind her. If it had been an ordinary person, this attack would have at least broken a few ribs, even if they did not die instantly. But the body of the demon hunter had long become as strong as a demon. She got up from the ground in less than 2 seconds, spread her wings, and rushed forward to meet her opponent head-on. Asterisk clang. Asterisk the sound of 4 magical weapons colliding with each other echoed in the empty library, and golden sparks flew in all directions. Demon hunter? What is your relationship with Illidan's storm rage?" Prince Tozdrin's expression changed slightly as he realized that the situation seemed to be far more complicated and dangerous than he had imagined. You have no right to mention Lady Illidan's name. You have no right to know what a great plan he is carrying out now. You are just a pitiful worm enslaved by power, a lost person immersed in magic addiction. On behalf of the true descendants of the High Elves, I grant you a merciful death." As soon as he finished speaking, Silner's eyes, which were filled with green light, suddenly shot out 2 green beams of evil energy, burning through the upper body of her opponent on the spot. No! Prince Tozdrin could not believe that his body, which had been strengthened repeatedly, could be so fragile. He screamed and swallowed his last breath. I beam, one of the most powerful abilities of the demon hunter, which was to continuously release the evil energy in her body through her eyes. The greater the number, the more damage it would cause. With Prince Tozedelin's pitiful magic resistance, he could not even last a few seconds. Please remember the domain name of this book. .com, Wonderful Book House. Chapter 642. Slaughter. Blood. Death. It took Silner less than half an hour to slaughter all the remaining Cinderas in the central library of the Mallet of Misfortune. After today, the Night Elves would completely lose the chance to regain their arcane powers, and the ancient city of Eretharas would disappear from Fairlas forever. All of this was to cover up the important magic ritual that was about to be carried out. Passing through the narrow and dark corridor, Zhangcheng soon came to a cage under the huge palace. All kinds of twisted elemental creatures filled every corner, constantly making crackling sounds. At a glance, magical energy of different attributes was constantly clashing and intersecting in the air, forming a unique and unstable cycle. In the center of this cycle was a four-legged demon. Its appearance was a bit like a mutated hellhound, but this hellhound's head and back were full of thin and long tentacles with countless colored eyeballs at the end. The scales on the surface of its body flashed with a faint green light from time to time. This is immortal? It doesn't seem as powerful as I thought. The female demon hunter frowned subconsciously and muttered softly. No, you don't understand. The real strength of this Hound of Calamity is not its destructive power, but its ability to maintain a connection with the twisted space-time and draw power from the army to replenish itself at any time. Do you feel it? It's using the magic nodes to constantly strengthen itself. It won't be long before it can break free from its shackles and obtain true freedom, Zhang Cheng explained with a cold smile. Perhaps in the eyes of others, this big dog was already weak to a certain extent, but in his eyes, it was easy to find the resonance between the blood-red eyeballs and the magic nodes around it. The arrogant Prince Tozeland did not realize that this demon that had been imprisoned for tens of thousands of years had already silently made preparations to destroy the entire magical defense. Arrogant mortals, always underestimating the abilities of demons. They don't understand what they're dealing with at all. They don't even understand how terrifying the Burning Legion is. Silner sighed and shook her head with a chuckle. In fact, similar situations were not rare. Many of the blood elves who had arrived in the Outland had the mentality that demons were just so, thinking that everything was under their control. Little did they know that in the eyes of the demons, from the moment they began to summon demons and use evil energy, they had already fallen into the control of the Legion. Only one person had successfully broken free from the influence of the Burning Legion. He was the first demon hunter, Illidan Stormrage. Just as Zhang Cheng opened his mouth to say something, the violet protective shield surrounding the central area suddenly collapsed with a boom. All the arcane creatures that were constantly surging around the circular area lost their stable forms, exploding one after another. Seeing this scene, he could not help but smirk and tease in a playful tone. Looks like my cute apprentice has dealt with those troublesome crystal towers around us. However, I sincerely hope that he can survive the next arcane explosion. Otherwise, it won't be easy to find another Tauren with the potential to become a mage. May Mother Earth bless poor Cape Kara, Silner joked before she drew her sword and charged at a Motar. As a demon hunter, destroying demons was her duty and obligation. She did not need anyone to remind her. Obviously, Immortal was not a high-ranking member of the Legion. Although her ability was a little strange, under the violent attack of the fell energy dual blades, she quickly fell to the ground and became a lifeless corpse. Zhang Cheng ignored the faintly stinking hound of disaster and stood alone in the center of the white platform. He closed his eyes and felt the flow and gathering of magical energy. There was no doubt that this was the center of the magic node. According to the Titans, this was an organ for the astral soul to sense the outside world. As long as there was a catalyst, it would immediately trigger a powerful energy reaction inside the astral soul. Thinking of this, he carefully took out the bottle of well water from the well of eternity from his pocket and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "What a pity I still can't accommodate such a powerful energy like the astral soul." so I might as well collect a little interest and let my soul become a magic soul. As soon as his voice trailed off, he raised his supreme power and began to transform the matter in the surrounding air. In a short while, the clear water under his feet went past his knees and formed a shining silver pool. Silner undoubtedly knew what was going to happen next. Without saying a word, she turned and ran outside. When she passed by the small square on the west side, she did not forget to take the injured Tauren with her so that he would not be crushed by the energy shock later. When the two of them flew and teleported more than 10 kilometers away from the mallet of misfortune, they suddenly felt a violent energy fluctuation coming from behind them. Looking back, they saw that the entire sky above the ancient city of Eretharas had been covered by endless arcane power and gradually formed a terrible vortex. The surrounding plants grew crazily as if they had eaten Jinkala, transforming from ordinary plants into magical plants. The dark purple flowers were like deadly poisons. No matter if it was herbivores or insects, as long as they were bitten, they would immediately explode with a bang. The sky, the earth, the ocean, the whole of Feralas trembled under the terrible energy gathering. The Nagas by the sea smelled the scent of magic and rushed desperately to the land, eager to find the cause of the upheaval. The night elves in the Moonplume Fortress were nervous and blew their horns, ordering hundreds of hippogriff riders to take off to the site of the incident to investigate. The ground troops crossed the strait in warships. No matter who caused all this, they would become the target of their attack. Of course, Zhang Cheng was completely unaware of what was happening outside. Even if he knew, he would not care too much, because at this moment, he was focused on guiding the huge amount of energy to ensure that his soul was permanently transformed into a magic soul. As the name implied, a magic soul was after abandoning the physical body. The soul could still perform all magic and, at the same time, did not have to worry about being forcibly pulled into the world of the dead. Although it didn't sound like much, in fact, no matter which magical world one was in, casting spells from the soul was a necessary qualification for a top-notch mage. The magic soul was a step further and permanently changed the essence of the soul, turning it from a pure soul into a state similar to a magical spirit. This state was more powerful than any wasteland demigod, but in order to do this, it would definitely hurt the Azeroth astral soul, which had already gone through many hardships. Simply put, this was like a bone marrow transplant operation. By extracting the most important thing in the astral soul to achieve the purpose of the evolution of one soul. Please remember the domain name of this book.com. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 643. What would be the effect of pouring a bottle of water from the well of eternity on a magic node? Just look at the arcane energy that had almost condensed in a solid form in the pool. Even Imhothal's corpse was unable to withstand the invasion, disintegrating into tiny particles in an extremely short period of time and dispersing with the wind. Zhang Cheng, who was standing in the middle of the whirlpool, had his skin, muscles, blood, and bones all become like the night elves, showing a deep violet color. Without a doubt, this was a manifestation of a strong arcane affinity, just like how the troll tribe that had settled down by the Well of Eternity 15,000 years ago had gradually evolved into night elves. However, he was not satisfied with this. To be precise, this was only the beginning. The true danger would come when his soul left his body and was directly exposed to the powerful energy. Inexhaustible energy. What a wonderful feeling. No wonder so many people are drooling over this astral soul slumbering in the depths of the Earth's core. More importantly, it can allow life forms to surpass their own limits and evolve toward a higher level. Now let me borrow some of it to complete the transformation of my soul. Zhang Cheng muttered to himself as he controlled his soul to slowly leave his body and plunge into the whirlpool. Asterisk boom. Asterisk instantly. Asterisk an indescribable surge of energy gushed out, spreading in all directions in the form of a shock wave. Whether it was the sturdy stone walls, pillars, or the wildly growing magical plants, all of them shattered and collapsed under the pressure of the shock wave. As for the ogres to the north and the satyrs to the east, they naturally did not escape this calamity. Almost all of them had died under this attack. In an instant, the area within a few kilometers of the mallet of misfortune had become a veritable forbidden zone for life. Even the aerial reconnaissance hippogriffs that had just arrived did not dare to rashly approach. Arcane magic, a power that originated from order. Even the titans of the pantheon were born from this energy. Its power was obvious to all, and there was no need for too much explanation. One only needed to close their eyes and feel the energy that was everywhere in the universe. Although the Night Elves had completely banned the research and learning of arcane spells after the Ancient War, it didn't mean that they didn't know how terrifying arcane spells were. On the contrary, as a unique species that had evolved under the influence of the Well of Eternity, their arcana affinity was the highest on the entire planet. Even the children who had never been trained could perform skills such as shadow escape with arcana energy. On the other hand, priests who had undergone some control training could not only skillfully use holy light and shadow energy, but also direct the arcane energy towards the enemy. This skill had a very nice name, Debris of the Stars. Therefore, the riders on the hippogriffs could clearly sense how terrifying the energy gathered in front of them was. Their faces were filled with fear. One of them, a woman with light blue hair, turned around and shouted at her companion, "My sister, go back and tell General Chandri's Feathermoon that we might be in big trouble. It's best to send someone to inform Priestess Tyrant of Darnassus. If necessary, we might even have to wake up Malfurion." Understood. The latter understood that this wasn't the time for nonsense. She quickly turned around and rode the hippogriffs towards the port in the west. Watching the figure of the sentinel gradually disappear into the distance, the woman with the light blue hair took a deep breath and quickly led the rest of the people to ascend. They carefully avoided the storm caused by the energy gathering and tried to get closer to the center bit by bit. Although everyone knew that with their strength, they wouldn't be able to cause any harm to the culprit, even if they got closer. However, they still risked their lives to obtain more information. Just as one of them was lucky enough to fly past the gigantic pillar of light that shot into the sky, the energy in the air suddenly seemed to be attracted by some terrifying force and surged towards the pool below. At the same time, this hippogriff's rider was also pulled in uncontrollably and was torn to pieces in just a few seconds. Not even a complete corpse was left intact. No. The commander in charge of leading the team couldn't help but roar in anger and sorrow. He swooped down and tried to grab something that looked like a pendant. This little thing was the last of the Sentinel's belongings that was still in good condition. It was clear that among the Night Elves, whose lifespans easily reached tens of thousands of years, the emotions that had settled down over time didn't weaken. Instead, they were more intense, passionate, and lasting than the short-lived humans. Even today, many of them still couldn't forget the family, friends, and loved ones they had lost in the Ancient War. Just as the commander's finger was about to touch the pendant, the pool below that was filled with massive arcane energy suddenly released all of its energy. Boom! The shockwave this time was completely different from the one before. Not only was the energy in the pool released, but it also affected the magic nodes and the energy vortex that was constantly gathering in the surroundings. The terrifying energy swallowed up everything within a radius of tens of kilometers in the blink of an eye. All the buildings and life within the mallet of misfortune disappeared without a trace. Even the mountains and earth collapsed and shattered in the process of the violent energy release. The powerful tremors not only caused tsunamis that were hundreds of meters tall, but also permanently changed the landscape of Feralus. As for the hippogriffs in charge of scouting, they had long since evaporated and disappeared from the world forever. Oh, my Mother Earth! This is simply too terrifying. Carla Cape couldn't stop trembling from head to toe. As a mage, he knew very well what such a powerful arcane explosion meant. He could also feel the thinning of the magical energy in the air. With the destruction of the important magic nodes, it wouldn't be long before the density of the energy here dropped to an extremely low level. The most typical consequence was that after a spellcaster entered this place, Both the power of their spells and the recovery of their magic power will be several times slower than in other places. Looks like Master has succeeded. Let's go quickly to the predetermined location. I don't want to be caught by those crazy night elves. Believe me, after this incident, they'll sweep through the entire area like crazy. Silner said as she pulled the Tauren up and quickly passed over a huge rock that was blocking the only way. Due to the strong earthquake caused by the explosion, the original path had been completely destroyed. The panicked beasts were even more frenzied, attacking every living thing that could be seen, even if it was their own kind. Not many people knew what secrets were hidden behind this sudden disaster. Only the gorgeous violet soul that floated in the center of the explosion told the world the truth. Chapter 644. He didn't know how much time had passed, maybe a few minutes, maybe a few hours. When Zhang Cheng's soul awoke from its deep slumber, he found himself trapped underground. All around him were collapsed gravel and mud, and the pool full of arcane energy had disappeared without a trace. Only the central area was surrounded by a faint magic force field. Without asking, he knew that it was a divine artifact, the supreme god's power released to protect his body. Feeling the powerful power emanating from the deepest part of his soul, he couldn't help but smile and murmur to himself, "Success! Incredible! So this is what it's like to completely merge the soul with magic energy. From now on, I don't need a body to maintain the most basic survival, and I don't need to chant or cast spells because I represent magic and energy." In addition, the so-called astral souls and titans were actually special particle forms of consciousness produced by the universe's primitive matter under high temperature and pressure inside the core of a star. So, in principle, as long as they were born, they would never die. Those who were killed by the Dark Titan Sargeras in the Pantheon had only lost their bodies to contain their souls and existed in the state of soul or consciousness. As long as someone was willing to help them rebuild a new body, they would immediately complete the so-called resurrection. Most importantly, once the astral soul began to develop an independent self-consciousness, it could never be killed. At most, it could only be corrupted or assimilated. But if the astral soul remained in a state of deep slumber, the huge amount of energy contained in the original cosmic matter of the planet could be seized and absorbed. But why? So far, why was every Titan in the Pantheon born from a planet with life and not a star? Normally, wouldn't it be easier for a star to awaken its astral soul if it was undergoing nuclear fusion all the time? Could it be that there are some secrets that I don't know about? There was no doubt that by merging with the magic nodes of Azeroth and taking the opportunity to directly extract the power of the astral soul from the entire planet, Zhang Cheng had glimpsed the essence of the Titans for the first time. Just like the information left behind from the ancient times of Azeroth, the Titans were the highest form of life in the universe. Even the so-called forces of the void could not compete with them directly. They could only try to corrupt the astral souls that had not yet developed their own consciousness and try to create their own Titans to conquer the entire universe. As for a head-on battle, even if all the Void Lords joined forces, they would still not be a match for Sargeras and would be crushed in a matter of minutes. Hence, they only dared to hide in dark corners and sneak around, such as throwing things like the ancient gods that kept whispering into Xing Hun's ears. According to Zhang Cheng's estimation, it shouldn't be a problem for him to personally deal with one or two of them. However, what he could not understand was why Titans were only born on planets. After all, according to the research of scientists on Earth, it was generally believed that the universe was born from a Big Bang and then slowly evolved into stable celestial bodies, such as stars, planets, and satellites. However rare the primitive materials of the universe were, there was no reason that they only existed on planets instead of stars that were larger and more active. Moreover, in general, the size and mass of stars were hundreds or even thousands of times that of planets. If a Titan was born on a star, wouldn't it be able to defeat these self-proclaimed Titans of the Pantheon? It was estimated that even if the founder of the Burning Legion, Sargeras, and the astral souls of Azeroth that were said to be many times stronger than Sargeras after awakening, they would still not be a match for the former. Just like a sentence that many cosmologists often mentioned, Behind the questions, there were more questions, and behind the unknown, there were more unknowns. Although Zhang Cheng had just uncovered the mystery of the birth of the Titans, he suddenly had more questions and directions to explore. With strong doubts, he controlled his soul to merge back into his body. Instantly, his skin, which was originally dark purple like that of the night elves, quickly returned to its original appearance. At the same time, the dim light emitted from his pupils gradually disappeared. Other than a strange symbol on the left side of his neck, there was basically no difference between him and a normal human. Of course, this symbol was not just a decoration, but something similar to a soul imprint. If his soul left his body, this symbol would disappear. However, if his soul entered his body, this symbol would immediately appear and give his body some extra power and resistance. One had to know that the magic soul was a kind of enhancement and evolution of life essence, so the body would also evolve. However, this evolution would not be completed in a short period of time. It would take about a few months to half a year. After feeling his heart beating strongly in his chest again, Zhang Cheng took a deep breath and asked the staff in his hand with a faint smile, "How is it? How much arcane energy did you absorb from the explosion just now?" A lot, Master. And I also feel a powerful force that is indescribable with words. The Supreme Heavenly God emitted an ear-piercing voice through the vibration. Yes, that is the astral souls of the Titans that are nurtured in the deepest part of this planet. However, I promise that one day it will be ours. No one or God can stop my progress, not even that woman who calls herself the Creator. Zhang Cheng sneered and revealed the truest ambition in his heart. That's right. In his subjective consciousness, no matter how powerful and invincible a life form was, as long as it could be quantified, it could be defeated and destroyed. Just because he could not do it now did not mean that he could not do it in the future. However, before that, he would choose to cooperate with the Supreme Heavenly God and destroy the ancient gods that were sleeping on the magical earth. He would obtain enough information from these gods to make himself stronger. I was created by you. I am the faithful embodiment of your ambitions and desires. So, you don't have to explain anything to me. Just like how you understand me, I also understand you. The Supreme Heavenly God replied meaningfully. Oh, is that so? That's great. Now, let's leave this place quickly. You have to know that it is not easy to bring a demon hunter back. I have to kill her first, then store the soul that is entangled with the demon in a soul stone. Finally, I have to properly preserve the corpse to prevent the evil energy in her body from going out of control. Zhang Cheng complained helplessly as he narrowed his eyes and used a spell to track the location on Carla Cape's staff. With a thought, he disappeared on the spot. Not long after he left, an army led by General Chandri's Feathermoon arrived at the ruins of the Mallet of Misfortune. She stared at the devastated earth and roared angrily. "Don't let me find out who did this. Otherwise, I swear that even if I have to chase you to the ends of the earth, I will make you pay for your actions." Chapter 645. There is no doubt that the violent energy explosion had disastrous consequences for the entire Feralas and even the eastern continent. In particular, the Moonplume stronghold, which was located on the island, was almost completely swallowed by the huge waves caused by the earthquake. Some of the Nagas who hated the night elves took the opportunity to rush up and kill many of them. Most of the supplies and weapons of the entire stronghold were washed into the endless sea. It was important to know that this was not a temporary camp like a sentry tower. It was the second most important military base after Darnassus. Not only did it have a large number of troops, but it also had the responsibility of controlling every movement on the western coast of Kalimdor. It was also the transit station of the Alliance's sea. Therefore, even after a month of the explosion, they still did not give up on the idea of finding the culprit. They even used the powerful Ancient of War to seal off the area around the Mallet of Misfortune. It seemed that they were planning to dig 3 feet into the ground, but they did not know that the culprit had already left this world. The only person in Azeroth who knew the truth was none other than Karla Cape, who had already met up with his compatriots in Mo Sacker's camp. Obviously, the appearance of a mage surprised these primitive Taurens and sent him back to Thunder Bluff to be questioned by Chief Karen Bloodhoof. No matter what, Karla Cape wasn't a nobody. On the contrary, although his reputation and status among the Blackwater pirates was not well known, he was not unfamiliar to most of the higher-ups. Therefore, the Horde was very curious about his sudden return to his homeland and the fact that he had become an arcane user. At the same time, they also hoped to obtain more knowledge and training about magic. It was important to know that because of the previous framing and conflicts created by MI7, the orcs, Taurens, and trolls were full of doubts and distrust towards the Forsaken. In addition, there were very few mages among the Darkspear trolls, and they were not organized into a system, so the Horde was now seriously lacking in magic support. What was even more frightening was that not long ago, the War of the Shifting Sands had finally made those idiots who worshipped strength and muscle finally realize how powerful magic was. Just the large-scale snowstorms and firestorms caused by the Alliance's spellcasters had easily killed tens of thousands of insects. It was far more destructive than any sword. As for Zhang Cheng, he was already sitting in a luxurious restaurant on the top floor of New York's Empire State Building. As he ate delicious food, he smiled and asked the woman in a sexy evening dress sitting across the table, "How is it? Are you satisfied with this world?" "Oomph. I can smell the scent of decay and depravity. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed that the technology that the gnomes and gnomes worshipped could reach such a level. How about it? Do you want me to infiltrate these lowly mortals and help you control the entire world?" In her human form, Onyxia stroked her long black hair. Her eyes were filled with ambition. Control the world? Ha ha. No, dear princess, you see the part of the world that floats on the surface of the water, but you do not see the part that is under the water. I assure you that if you attempt to drastically alter the existing order and polity of this world, someone will soon come knocking on your door to talk to you. You might be able to handle one or two of them, but when they join forces, the end result will not be much worse than what happened in Stormwind City. Zhang Cheng laughed and shook his head. He simply couldn't understand why the Black Dragon Princess was always so keen on power and scheming behind the scenes. "You mean there are people like you in this world?" Onyxia was not a fool. She immediately understood the subtext in his words and frowned subconsciously. "Yes, this world is much more dangerous than you think. You know, someone once warned me that there are some ancient gods sleeping in a corner of this planet. Their power is not inferior to the Titans in the world of Azeroth. Therefore, I sincerely suggest that you pretend to be an ordinary rich person and don't try to do anything dangerous." After that, Zhang Cheng ignored the Black Dragon Princess and looked at the demon hunter next to him. Because she was wearing the Orb of Deception, Silner was like a princess from a fairy tale. Not only did she have amazing platinum hair and delicate facial features, but her skin was also white and transparent. Her figure was so good that many guests and waiters looked at her with amazement and envy. The only flaw was that her eyelids were always closed, and she couldn't see her eyes, which were known as the window to the soul. "I'm very satisfied with this world. Although many people's dirty looks annoyed me, it's still tolerable. I don't understand. Living in such a highly developed and civilized world, why do you still take a huge risk to go to those extremely dangerous worlds?" The huntress elegantly put a piece of pudding into her mouth with a curious expression on her face. She paid a huge price to get rid of the world full of war, killing, hatred, and death. She even really died once. Zhang Cheng smiled and explained without thinking. "For more knowledge and more power, you have been in contact with humans, so you should know that we are an insatiable species. Our short lifespan makes us hungry for things such as power, money, beauty, power, and so on. They're like a pot of boiling water that keeps churning until they are completely boiled." Silner nodded thoughtfully and said, "Got it. What about me? What do you need me to do?" "No, not for the time being. Enjoy your life. I will call you if I need you. Remember, don't use the power that ordinary people can't understand unless it is necessary." Zhang Cheng picked up the cup and drank it. His eyes were shining with a strange light. 2 days ago, he had contacted his other two allies. When the temperature of the Atlantic Ocean began to warm up, he would go out to sea to find the whereabouts of the sunken ship. He would try to settle the matter about the entrance of the City of Gold around June or July this year. If nothing unexpected happened, he would stay in his own territory for the next few months and try not to run around, in case of any unexpected situations. Got it. Silner didn't like to talk nonsense. She directly stood up and pretended to pick up the blind man's crutch and walked outside. Some guys with bad intentions also stood up to pay the bill and followed her from a distance. It seemed that they were going to kidnap her in a place where there was no one and no surveillance, and then enjoy this angelic girl. After all, for the really powerful people in the United States, rape was never a big deal. Not to mention whether the victim had the courage to call the police. They could rely on the resources at hand to control public opinion and the news media to turn black into white. Coupled with a luxurious team of lawyers, even if they were convicted, they wouldn't have to go to jail at all. Of course, this time they chose the wrong target. Looking at those ugly bastards disappearing around the corner, Onyxia curled her lips in disdain and commented, "A bunch of trash dominated by a lower class. Oh, by the way, I'm getting married this Saturday. Are you going to attend my wedding?" Puff. Zhangqing couldn't help but spit out the drink in his mouth. What? Marriage? With whom? An old guy in his 60s. Don't worry, I have controlled his mind with magic. It won't be long before more than $5 billion of wealth will be in my pocket. Chapter 646. Using marriage to seize other people's property? The shameless behavior of the Onyx Dragon Princess really broke Zhangqing's understanding of the bottom line. At the same time, he secretly complained that no wonder the other party didn't accept the living expenses he gave like Silner. It turned out that the living expenses were too little, so she directly hooked a rich guy. After all, it was not unusual for an old man in his 60s to marry a young and beautiful wife, even if he died in the woman's belly within a few months. As for the trouble of the will and property division after death, that was another matter. Anyway, he didn't think that with Onyxia's character, she would leave an unsolvable mess. Instead, she would directly shut the descendants and family members of the husband and wait for the storm to subside before dealing with them one by one. To some extent, it really matched the old saying, "Good people don't live long, but scourges live for thousands of years." Usually, people like Onyxia, who were good at scheming and had no so-called moral bottom line at all, could do very well at any time, any era, and any environment. After politely declining the wedding invitation proposed by the Onyx Dragon Princess, Zhangqing quickly left the Empire State Building restaurant and returned to the headquarters in New York alone. As soon as he entered the door, the Pullman, who had been waiting for a long time, came close with an old man in his 70s and said in a low voice, "I found the person you asked before, but he proposed a slightly excessive exchange condition." "Oh, what condition?" Zhangqing stopped and looked up and down at the old man with sunken eyes and a large aquiline nose. Although he was already 70 years old, the old man not only didn't show any signs of aging, but his eyes showed a sharp gaze that didn't match his age. He wants power, unrestricted power, and at least $200 million of annual funding. The Pullman replied, slightly awkwardly. As a person who understood the operating rules of the underground world, he knew very well that such conditions were almost equivalent to blackmail. If it was a lord or counselor with a slightly worse temper, they might kill him on the spot. Interesting. Tell me, why do you think I will agree to such an exchange condition? Also, how much do you know about our world? Zhangqing casually picked up a bottle of wine from the wine cabinet and poured a glass for this guest from the ordinary world. The latter took a small sip and quickly replied with a smile, "To be honest, I don't know much about you people. I only know that there are some minority groups with supernatural powers hidden in this world." But what was interesting was that whenever someone wanted to investigate further, all kinds of accidents would happen to the person in charge. Some would disappear from the face of the earth. Some would get into accidents or illnesses, and some would even be dismissed by their superiors. It's obvious that you're controlling the situation in the dark. You're even able to influence the highest decision-making body of a country. As for the conditions, I just don't want to encounter an outsider commanding an insider. I believe that with the power you have, it shouldn't be a problem to deal with me." Zhang Qing nodded thoughtfully. "Looks like you've done a lot of homework. If you don't mind, can you introduce yourself? I need to know if you have enough ability to complete the task I gave you." "Of course. My name is Leonid, and I used to work for the former Soviet intelligence organization KGB. I was responsible for collecting and organizing intelligence on Latin America. But after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that bastard Yeltsin set up a committee to liquidate the KGB. In just a few years, one of the most powerful intelligence organizations in the world was dismembered. In order to avoid being liquidated, I personally designed the death of myself and my subordinates. I successfully escaped to Brazil and lived in seclusion. I barely survived by selling some intelligence. If you want to build an independent global intelligence collection system from scratch, then I'm definitely the right person to use." The old man undoubtedly knew what kind of person he was dealing with, and he didn't try to hide it at all. He generously explained his origin. After all, most people who understood geopolitics and the world situation knew that the interim chairman of the former Soviet Union, Klyuchkov, ordered the KGB to monitor the phone calls of all the high-level officials in Moscow on August 19th. As soon as Yeltsin came to power, he ordered Stepashin to start a terrible liquidation that would last for several years. With the advantage of occupying the commanding heights of public opinion, this huge intelligence organization that once made the Western world feel uneasy experienced the most disastrous years in history. It could be said that other than keeping the secret agent list, which was like a pair of underwear, the rest of the list was almost completely stripped clean from the inside out. Countless people who made great sacrifices for their countries not only did not receive the rewards they deserved, but they also became complete villains. They were reviled and criticized by the people of their own countries. Some were even executed or imprisoned. The darkest side of political struggles was completely exposed. In order to protect themselves, some agents began to use their authority to fake their deaths to get away, while others directly surrendered to former enemies, such as the CIA and the SGS of the United Kingdom, using the information in their hands in exchange for favorable conditions. Anyway, before President Putin, who was born in the KGB, came to power, the entire Russia and Eastern Europe were in a state of extreme chaos, and the outflow of top talents in various fields was even more serious to a shocking extent. It could be said that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. Its collapse indirectly contributed to the rapid rise of the neighboring countries in the field of science and technology. The Soviets used practical actions to prove how ignorant and stupid most ordinary people were. They would rather choose to believe the lies from the enemy than give their country's elites a little time to reform. However, these had little to do with Zhang Qing. He was using his psychic ability to spy on the brain activity of the old man in front of him. After a few minutes, he smiled and asked, "Can you tell me about what you are doing now? Intelligence trading sounds interesting." "Interesting? Ha ha ha. No, it has nothing to do with interesting. In fact, this job is very dangerous, and you need to have enough professional knowledge and vision. In order to avoid being noticed by the intelligence agencies of those powerful countries, most of the time we can only provide the movements of the police and the army to gangs and drug dealers in exchange for money. And with the rapid development of electronic technology, the cost of intelligence collection has become higher and higher. We need a lot of money to buy advanced equipment. Otherwise, do you think I would risk my life to contact you?" A bitter smile appeared on Leonid's old face as he said this. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, he was disgusted to become someone else's subordinate again. But the problem was that people had to bow under the eaves. No intelligence organization in the world could be self-sufficient in the true sense. If they didn't want to be eliminated by the times, then they must have a financial backer to provide them with a steady stream of funds. Please remember the domain name of the book.com, Wonderful Book House. Com. Chapter 647. So you came to me and wanted me to provide you with sufficient funds, but you didn't want to completely obey my orders. Instead, you tried to use a cooperative method. Zhang Qing was obviously not a fool. He immediately saw through the other party's idea of borrowing the chicken to lay the eggs. It must be known that for a special organization like an intelligence agency, if it was not completely controlled, it was easy to have a lot of trouble. For example, it was easy to have too many subordinates, or easy to be infiltrated and controlled by other intelligence agencies. Although the original intention of establishing an intelligence agency was not to steal the intelligence secrets between big countries or important technology, but to investigate various ancient relics, and obtain the corresponding national hydrology and ocean exploration information of the corresponding sea areas. After all, the underground world's intelligence system may be very convenient, but the confidentiality had never been very good. It was inevitable that some people with ulterior motives would know about it and cause some unnecessary trouble. So at this time, if there was an intelligence agency that obeyed his orders, it would not be noticed by the higher-ups of the underground world. Because in their eyes, the greatest use of maintaining contact with the ordinary world was to not expose themselves to the public. As for the hostility between countries, interest groups, and even killing each other, no one cared at all. Unless there was a crisis of nuclear war, the council would not bother to pay attention to it. In short, Zhang Cheng used the contempt of the higher-ups of the underground world for ordinary people to achieve the purpose of covering up some of his private actions. Leonid seemed to have noticed something. He stroked the short beard on his chin and explained, "I understand that this request is a bit excessive, but you have to understand that intelligence gathering requires very professional talents, and it must be kept confidential. So, if outsiders interfere, it can easily cause disastrous consequences, so it must be relatively independent. This is also why most countries' administrative agencies do not directly control their own intelligence agencies. Instead, the military, which is relatively strong in confidentiality, is responsible for it." Zhang Cheng smiled and waved his hand. "No, there is no need to explain. I understand a lot of principles. But you neglected one point, and that is that I am not an ordinary person at all. There are many ways to solve your so-called confidentiality problem. Sorry, what I need is a subordinate intelligence agency that can 100% obey orders, not a partner who wants to negotiate with me." "You mean there are two choices in front of me now. One is to unconditionally surrender, and the other is to disappear." With $2 billion of funding every year, not to mention building an intelligence collection network, it was not a problem to compete with internationally renowned intelligence organizations. "What, are you surprised? Do you know how much tax I collect every month from illegal activities in New York State? Just cash alone is hundreds of millions of dollars, and the number of transfers through bearer bonds and under-the-table bank operations is far beyond your imagination. Half of these taxes need to be paid to the Congress, and the other half is at the discretion of the members, so don't doubt my financial resources." Zhang Cheng explained with a smile. For him, problems that could be solved with money were not problems. Even if the tax was insufficient, he could still rely on alchemy to create some rare metals, such as gold and platinum, to exchange for money. Leonid, who recovered from the shock, subconsciously clenched his fists and asked excitedly, "Then what about the advanced weapons and equipment you just mentioned? Can you show me a few samples?" "No problem. Come with me. In fact, I have prepared everything for you." As the last word blurted out, Zhang Cheng suddenly grabbed Leonid's wrist and directly activated teleportation magic and disappeared. The next second, the two instantly appeared in a huge, empty underground bunker, surrounded by all kinds of equipment, including guns, vehicles, and electronic equipment. The most exaggerated thing was that there were a few technological-looking planes parked in the center, and the largest one was as big as a Boeing 747. There were no sea or air routes, and there were no U.S. military bases or radar stations nearby. There are several permanent portals at the bottom that can send you and your people to any corner of the world. As for those airplanes, they all took off and landed vertically. Each one of them had both radar and visual concealment functions. In other words, You can fly it into the airspace of any country without fear of being discovered. Most importantly, there was a very advanced lie detector here. It could help you distinguish who you could trust and who is a traitor with 100% certainty. How is it? Are you satisfied with these? Obviously, Zhang Cheng placed everything he got from Hydra and everything he traded with S.H.I.E.L.D. here. I'm satisfied. Of course he was satisfied. I promise that with these, it won't be long before you have the most powerful intelligence agency in the world. When he said this, Leonid's eyes revealed a strong ambition and desire. Zhang Cheng quickly noticed this and nodded with satisfaction. Very good. Remember your promise. I'm a person who only looks at the results and doesn't care about the process, so you'd better do what you say. After a while, I will launch a few multifunctional private satellites. At that time, you will also have a global communication and reconnaissance system that will never be monitored by anyone. Now I'll give you your first task, to get as much information about the Atlantic region as possible from various countries. You have about 4 months. After that, he stuffed a simple map covered with shadows into the old man's hand. The latter took a few glances and responded without hesitation. No problem. 4 months is enough. But before we take action, I need you to give me a little time to rebuild the team. With $2 billion a year and the advanced equipment in this base, there is no intelligence agency in the world that can compete with us. Oh, it's a good thing to have ambition and desire. It's one of the driving forces of mankind. As I mentioned before, I don't care about the process, whether you sell arms, smuggle drugs, buy and sell intelligence, or directly intervene in the mercenary industry, infiltrate and subvert the regimes of certain countries. That's your business. But one thing is, don't make too much trouble. I don't want to clean up your mess, understand? Zhang Cheng warned meaningfully. Understood. If I still need your help after all this, wouldn't I be too incompetent? The corners of Leonid's mouth rose slightly, revealing a confident smile. Oh, I almost forgot. In order to make you work better, I'm going to give you a small gift at the end. As soon as his voice fell, Zhang Cheng suddenly stretched out a finger and tapped on the old man's forehead. In the blink of an eye, a faint magic mark slowly emerged, and then the old man's appearance began to become younger, from 70 years old to a man in his early 50s. Feeling the vitality of his aging organs, Leonid's pupils shrank violently. He raised his head and asked in an uncertain tone, "What did you do to me?" "It's very simple. I gave you new vitality and extended your life. As long as your work efficiency is satisfactory, you don't have to worry about aging and dying. But if I find out that you betrayed me one day, then this little thing left in your soul will absorb all your vitality." "Magic? I see." Leonid nodded thoughtfully. He didn't show any surprise, nor did he have the slightest intention of resisting. Because he knew that this was a way to control him, it was not much different from the way the KGB controlled their spies and agents. In contrast, this method of control was quite gentle, and it gave him an extra lifespan, and he even felt like he had gained something. Well, let's end our conversation here today. Regarding the use of various facilities and equipment in this underground base, you can directly report to X. Don't worry about electricity and energy. The underground oil depot here has enough gasoline for you to use for 20 years. Electricity is generated in a way you can't understand, and it will never run out. After you go back, send a contact person to New York as soon as possible. In the future, if it's not necessary, I won't contact you directly, but through him or her to contact you. M. Chapter 649. January was the coldest season in the Northern Hemisphere. However, for Rio de Janeiro, the capital of Brazil, located at a low latitude in the Southern Hemisphere, it was still sunny. The highest temperature during the day could even reach about 30 degrees Celsius. The streets and alleys were filled with scantily clad Latin beauties. However, this South American pearl, known as the City of God, was far less beautiful than outsiders imagined. In particular, the various criminal organizations entrenched in the slums were as numerous as the hairs on a cow. In less than 10 months, more than 5,000 murders had occurred in Rio de Janeiro, a city with a population of 5 million people. This was only for those whose bodies could be found. As for those whose bodies had been destroyed, there would only be more. What was even more frightening was that even the police who maintained law and order could not guarantee their own safety. Every year, more than hundreds of police officers died in the line of duty. However, it was precisely this kind of city full of chaos, drugs, exposure, and death that became the ideal refuge in the eyes of many people. The reason was very simple. Due to the large and small gangs fighting with each other day and night, they directly drove the government forces out of many blocks, thus forming large areas of lawless areas. In these blocks, no one cared where you came from or whether you entered Brazil through legal means. What the gangs cared about was whether you had money or could be of use. Obviously, a group of former Soviet professional spies who escaped from the KGB were undoubtedly such a group of special talents that were valued by the gang bosses. This was because they could always get information about the movements of the government and the police in the first place. Occasionally, they would privately sell some high-priced information to rival gangs to ensure that the regional forces remained in a state of balance and not monopolize. Of course, being able to do this did not mean that they were very powerful. It was just that whether it was the government or the gangs in South America, they all belonged to the scum with less than 5 combat effectiveness. In addition, corruption and bribery had spread from the top to the bottom. Some cynical locals would even say that if all the Brazilian government bureaucrats were shot from top to bottom and then investigated their economic situation, they would find that no one was clean. In such an environment, not to mention combating corruption and improving the government's administrative ability, even shouting slogans would be in danger of being killed. In a villa near the beach in the southern district of Rio de Janeiro, 9 men and women dressed differently were staying in the living room without saying a word. One of them, a muscular man who was about 185 meters tall, kept looking outside and asked without turning his head, "How long has it been since we lost contact, boss?" 23 hours, 15 minutes. Another petite woman glanced at her watch and quickly gave the answer. It could be seen that they were very nervous at the moment. All kinds of guns of different lengths were placed on the table, as if they were prepared to deal with the worst possible situation. Damn it, I hate this feeling. The middle-aged man who was leaning against the door punched the wall with his fist. Are you sure this safe house isn't exposed? Don't worry, I bought this place with the help of a businessman shell company. He died in South Africa 5 years ago, so it's definitely. Before the beauty in the sexy swimsuit could finish her words, an old car suddenly stopped in front of the villa. An old man in his 50s wearing sunglasses got out of the car. Someone's coming. Spectacular, who was standing by the window, immediately sounded the alarm. When the other people in the living room heard the news, they picked up their weapons and spread out, hiding themselves behind cover. Just as the atmosphere became more and more tense, the door made a clicking sound. About a few seconds later, the old man stepped in from the outside, took the initiative to take off his sunglasses, and said with a smile, "Don't be nervous, it's me." "Boss." No, you're not him. You're much younger than him." The brawny man, standing by the window, did not let down his guard and still pointed the gun in his hand at the old man's head. 5, 7, 18, 22, 6, 45, 11. The old man did not try to explain anything. He directly read out a series of numbers with unknown meaning in front of everyone. Interestingly, when the other 9 people in the villa heard this series of numbers, they put down the weapons in their hands and quickly showed an expression of disbelief. The brawny man closest to him took a deep breath and asked in an uncertain tone, "Boss, did you have plastic surgery?" "Plastic surgery? Ha ha. No, Griff, it's much better than that. Come closer, I have something important to announce." The old man opened his arms and waved. Although everyone had a lot of questions in their hearts, after confirming the old man's identity, they still subconsciously chose to obey the order. In just a few seconds, these former Soviet spies who escaped from the KGB returned to the sofa in the middle of the living room, their eyes full of doubts and puzzlement. But the old man obviously had no intention of explaining and directly touched the magic ring on his finger. In an instant, a blinding white light enveloped everyone in it. Before they could react to what had happened, they found that they were no longer in the beach villa in the South District of Rio de Janeiro, but in an underground base full of sci-fi. There is no doubt that this old man in his 50s was none other than Leonid, who had separated from Zhang Cheng not long ago. "Good afternoon, sir. Is there anything I can help you with?" Sensing that there were strangers in the base, Project X quickly entered a state of alert. Several automatic firing turrets adjusted their direction and surrounded the 9 people in place. The moment they made any threatening moves, the terrifying metal storm would tear them to pieces in a matter of minutes. "Boss, what's going on? You owe us an explanation." The brawny man hurriedly threw away the weapon in his hand and shouted with his hands raised high. The rest of the people also reacted quickly and imitated him. Leonid smiled and comforted them. "Relax, unless one of you betrayed me. There's no need to be so nervous. Project X, start the lie detector program. I need to question each of them." "As you wish, sir." In less than 10 seconds, a place like an elevator platform rose from the ground. "Who want to go first?" Leonid narrowed his eyes and looked at his men, trying to find fear and panic in their facial expressions and eyes. As a commander from the KGB, he had long learned how to abandon personal feelings in his work. No matter how loyal these 9 people were, they needed to be tested again. After all, he still needed these people to build the entire intelligence agency, so he absolutely could not allow even one betrayer. Otherwise, as the organization expanded, it would be infiltrated by the enemy sooner or later. "I'll go first." The petite woman seemed to realize what was going to happen next, and took the initiative to step forward. "Very good. Tatiana, tell me, have you ever sold information to other spy organizations?" Leonid calmly raised his first unusually sharp question. Chapter 650. Just as Leonid began to evaluate the loyalty of his subordinates, Zhang Cheng had left New York through teleportation magic and arrived at Los Angeles, the most famous city of angels on the west coast of California. However, he wasn't here for a vacation, nor was he here to try to have some intimate contact with the sexy Hollywood beauties like many lecherous men. On the contrary, he came here mainly for 2 important things. First, to launch his own private satellite. After the negotiation and efforts of Chester Barsham, the most important Western aerospace and missile test center in the United States finally offered a launch price of $150 million per satellite. Don't think that this is expensive. In fact, because private launch vehicles were far less developed than they would be 15 years later, the only countries with the technology and strength to launch commercial satellites were Russia, Japan, the European Space Agency, India, the United States, and China. But the problem was that Russia was now in its darkest period. Although the technology and rocket industry system were still very intact, due to the lack of sufficient funds, many of the equipment were seriously aging and there were various safety problems. Maybe it would blow up for various reasons as soon as it was ignited. Although the fee was cheap, whether it could be launched to a fixed orbit depended on luck. The same was true for India. Due to the heartless and irresponsible nature of the 3 countries, no one with a little brain would choose them to launch important satellites. Zhang Cheng did not want to use the 2 advanced satellites brought back from the Marvel world. They would blow up before they could be used. As for the remaining countries, although the technology and safety were guaranteed to a certain extent, because North America was under his influence, it was best to let the United States do it. After all, the Western Aerospace and Missile Test Center had promised not to do any inspection of the 2 multifunctional satellites, and there was no need to worry about the technology that was more than 20 years ahead of the world being discovered. Second, the president of the North American Supreme Council, Cosmo, finally received the long-awaited life-prolonging potion. But unfortunately, when the potion reached his hands, it was already nearly 1/3 gone. Obviously, someone intercepted part of it halfway. So the 140-year-old old monster finally burst into unprecedented anger and began to order his men to frantically search every place along the way, swearing that no matter who the other party was, they would pay the price for their actions, the price of blood and death. His unscrupulous arrest, interrogation, and slaughter in the United States undoubtedly violated the interests of the other few representatives of the highest council. As a result, the contradictions within the council were intensified. Several small-scale conflicts and confrontations even broke out. For a moment, many residents of the underground world were in a state of panic, afraid that an even more intense internal conflict would break out. At the request of a female counselor with Nordic elven blood, Zhang Cheng agreed to mediate between the two parties. If the mediation was successful, not only would he gain a great reputation and the gratitude of both sides, he would also gain many substantial things, such as his favorite ancient books and knowledge or interesting magic items. In short, this mediator role was planned from the very beginning, so there was no reason for him to reject it. Perhaps for others, appeasing the anger in the chairman's heart was an almost impossible task. Because all the counselors knew that Cosmo's life was about to come to an end, anyone who tried to stop him from extending his lifespan, even if it was only a third of his lifespan, would definitely suffer the fiercest revenge. However, for Zhang Cheng, who had just evolved his magic soul, he could have as many life-prolonging potions as he wanted. All he needed to do was to make up for one bottle, and all his problems would be solved. With a very relaxed and happy mood, he quickly walked to a villa with a black obelisk on Venice Beach. With a smile, he said to the gargoyle statue at the door, "May I ask if Chairman Cosmo is home?" Instantly, the eyes of the statue slowly opened and a red light flashed in them. In a low voice, it replied, "Welcome, Mr. Counselor. Master is in the living room on the first floor. By the way, his temper has been a little irritable recently. Since last night, 2 servants and 4 slaves have been torn apart by terrifying magic. You'd better be a little more careful. Don't worry, I'm here for this matter." After saying that, Zhang Cheng did not pay any more attention to this highly intelligent magical creation. He walked through the quiet courtyard and directly pushed open the tightly shut door. Before he had time to observe the decorations and furnishings around him, he felt a strong wave of magic energy rushing toward him. There was no hesitation at all. He immediately raised the supreme heavenly power that was disguised as a Western-style staff and instantly created an anti-magic force field. When the shocking magic energy flew near him, it was immediately repelled by the force field and disappeared without a trace. "Dear Chairman, your way of welcoming guests is really unique." Zhang Cheng deliberately raised his eyebrows and teased him. "Oh, damn it. Sorry, Zhang, I didn't notice it was you." After seeing the true face of the visitor, Cosmo immediately retracted his sharp and murderous gaze and put on a vexed expression. He then sighed and explained, "I believe you should have heard that some lawless fellows even dared to steal things that belonged to me. Moreover, they stole 1/3 of them. Without a doubt, they don't want me to extend my lifespan too much, so that the position of chairman can be vacated sooner. Chasing power, and a long lifespan is the innate desire of every underground world resident. You can't kill all of them. Madame Yvonne asked me to be a mediator. She hopes that you will stop provoking the bottom line of the other counselors. This will be beneficial to everyone. I won't let you give in for nothing. This is my sincerity." As the last word was spoken, Zhang Cheng directly took out a bottle of 15-year-old life-prolonging potion that he had prepared beforehand from his pocket. Another bottle? Cosmo obviously felt the strong life force emitted from the potion bottle, and his eyes widened in surprise. "Are you sure that it will still be effective after I drink it?" Zhang Cheng nodded lightly. "Of course. Do you think that the life-prolonging potion I concoct will be like those mediocre alchemists who can only take it once in their lives? No, my life-prolonging potion can be taken without limit." When he said this, his tone revealed his contempt and disdain for the other master alchemists. Due to the limitations of the raw materials and formulas, the other 2 master alchemists in the underground world who could concoct life-prolonging potions could only take effect once. In other words, each person could only take the potion once in their lives. The next time they wanted to take it, they would develop a resistance to the potion, causing the life force to be unable to be absorbed by the body. However, Zhang Cheng, who had been to Azeroth and the Faron continent, had already broken through the limitations. As long as the soul was intact, even if the body completely rotted and disappeared, he could still revive it. Chapter 651. A psychologist once said that as a person gradually aged, he would inevitably become more and more afraid of death. He would also become more and more eager to know what the world after death was like. From there, he would shift his attention from the secular world to religion, trying to find a placebo from those fabricated things that did not exist, deceiving himself that he could go to another world and live a better life after death. Even though a powerful magus like Cosmo was filled with disgust towards the various religions in existence, the fear of death was still unavoidable. His crazy actions these days were the best manifestation of this. Thus, when he found out that the longevity potion in front of him was still effective, he snatched it over without hesitation, pulled the cork, and drank it all in one gulp. Feeling the abundant life force flowing through his body with his blood, the anger in his heart finally calmed down completely. He licked his lips and sighed. This feeling is simply unparalleled. Dear Zhang, you have invented an incredible potion. I guarantee that if others knew that the longevity potion could be consumed without limit, the entire underground world would descend into madness. Then, for the peace and stability of the underground world, you better keep this a secret from me. You must know that it is not easy to make this potion, not to mention the complicated craftsmanship and harsh alchemy techniques. Just the material called life essence is hard to obtain. I cannot satisfy so many people's desire for life. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders innocently. There was no need to ask to know that this was definitely a lie. It was done to control the ruling class of the underground world. Many people could escape death through different methods. For example, Catherine the Desire, which had used many times to switch to a younger body, or some of the magical rituals passed down from ancient times by the Adept Association to extend one's lifespan. However, these methods all had their own flaws and side effects. Even the soul splitting used by the legendary necromancer Faust, who claimed to be able to defeat death, was rather dangerous. Not only did he have to sacrifice many living people every time he split, he also had to endure immense pain. However, the longevity potion was different. As long as one drank it, the vitality of the body would increase. Unless there were problems with the soul, one could live for hundreds or even thousands of years until the last bit of potential in the cells was squeezed dry. One could imagine how crazy those old fellows with great power would become when they heard the news. They would impatiently take out all the good things they had collected in their lifetime to exchange for a bottle of potion. And from then on, Zhang Cheng would also receive a death-free gold medal. No matter how big of a mess he caused in the future, the ruling class of the underground world would think of ways to help him deal with the aftermath. This was because he was the only one in the world who could concoct a life-prolonging potion that could be repeatedly consumed. Cosmo was undoubtedly aware of this. He sat on the sofa and gently stroked the beard on his chin. From the beginning to the end, he didn't look at the female corpse that had died, tragically not far away. Obviously, this maid was very unfortunate to have bumped into the muzzle of the gun. As a result, her chest was directly crushed by some kind of powerful magic, and dark red blood flowed all over the ground. About 2 to 3 minutes later, the speaker seemed to have figured something out and nodded lightly. Of course I'll keep it a secret for you. But I'm curious, why did you promise Yvonne to mediate the conflict between me and the other counselors? Or, in other words, are you trying to expand your influence in the Supreme Council? Half and half. I do want to slightly increase my influence, but more importantly, those counselors have offered me a price that I'm tempted by. You should know that I'm a person who likes to collect knowledge and technology. I can't resist such temptation at all, Zhang Cheng explained with a smile. Ha ha, I like your honesty. All right, for your sake, all the conflicts will end here. But there's a prerequisite for me to convey. They have to find that damned thief within half a year. Otherwise, the consequences will be dire. No one can get away with robbing me of my things. When he said the last word, Cosmo's face was filled with a combination of viciousness, cruelty, brutality, and other negative emotions. Understood. I promise to convey every word to every counselor. Zhang Cheng stood up and bowed with one hand on his chest. As for what would happen if the thief wasn't caught in half a year's time, he wasn't interested in it at all. Anyway, he had already accomplished his goal. All right, you don't have to be so formal. You're an indispensable member of the council, unlike them. Oh, right, I almost forgot to give you a reward. Take it. This is a book that records the powerful curse magic used by the priests in ancient Egypt. It's very, very rare and precious. It's said that a demigod once died from the curse in this book. Cosmo quickly retrieved an ancient book that was bound with papyrus and had a golden cover from the bookshelf behind him. After thousands of years, this book was not damaged at all. It was simply a miracle that the words and pictures were not blurred at all. In particular, when he held it in his hand, he could immediately feel a wave of malicious magical energy flowing through the pages of the book. It could help every reader better understand the principles of curse magic. Zhang Cheng carefully flipped through it in his hands. It didn't take long for him to be immersed in the strange symbols and unbelievable curses. He didn't know how long it had been. Perhaps it was 10 minutes, or perhaps it was a few hours. In any case, when he came back to his senses, the sky outside was already completely dark. The servants and slaves in the villa had already prepared a sumptuous meal and stood respectfully at the side to serve their master. Cosmo's appetite was quite good. He ate a large prawn without the shell in a few bites. He teased in a half-joking tone, "Dear Zhang, I have to admit that your thirst for knowledge is really impressive. However, that book already belongs to you. You can take it back and study it slowly. Now come and eat something. I guarantee that the seafood on the table will satisfy your picky taste buds. Also, if you take a fancy to any beautiful maid, just tell me. Don't stand on ceremony. I'll transfer her magic contract to you." "They're all contracted slaves?" Zhang Cheng glanced at the 20 or so young women around the age of 20, his eyes revealing undisguised surprise. Contracted slaves, as the name suggested, were true slaves who were bound by a magic contract and couldn't even commit suicide. They couldn't resist any orders given by their master, even if it was to kill their own flesh and blood or to cut off a part of their body and eat it. Generally speaking, only when an extremely serious crime had been committed would the Supreme Council demote a resident of the underground world and his family to a contracted slave. What was even more frightening was that this terrifying punishment contract would be passed down to future generations. This was because there was a specific time limit on the contract. It could be 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 500 years, 1,000 years. If someone couldn't live for that long, their descendants would continue to live as contracted slaves in their place, generation after generation, until the time limit was up. If there were no descendants, the Supreme Council would use powerful magic to help produce a descendant. To a certain extent, this was the most frightening way for the Supreme Council to punish someone. Chapter 652. Yes, they're all contracted slaves. Moreover, they're the second and third generation. The shortest term is still 50 years. The most important thing is that they can guarantee absolute obedience and loyalty to their master. No matter how you torture, mistreat, or even kill them, they will still be madly infatuated with you and love you. As Cosmo spoke, he reached out his hand and hooked his finger at the female servant on his left. This white woman, who looked to be in her early 20s, immediately walked forward and knelt on one knee. She lifted the back of the chairman's hand that was full of wrinkles and age spots and kissed it deeply. Her two light green eyes were filled with a kind of sick and twisted love and passion. Without a doubt, all of this was caused by a powerful magical contract. Perhaps it was through hypnosis, suggestion, brainwashing, and the like, forcing the victim to think that the contract holder was their closest family member or lover. It could also be like a mind flayer, directly inducing illusions in the brain, causing the victim to be unable to distinguish between illusion and reality. Over time, they would slowly be immersed in it and unable to extricate themselves. Regardless of which it was definitely not the intention of the person. Thinking of this, Zhang Qing couldn't help but smile and shake his head as he rejected. "Forget it. I have no interest in these servants who don't even have self-awareness. Their value is not even comparable to the high-level magical puppets created by alchemy." "No, my dear Zhang, you should know what I'm referring to. Don't tell me that as a man with a normal biological orientation, You're not interested in these beauties whose figures, looks, and temperaments are far above average. Believe me, they will give you unprecedented pleasure in bed. Cosmo raised the corner of his mouth slightly, as he hinted meaningfully. Apologies, Mr. Chairman. When it comes to women, I personally prefer real feedback and not a bunch of puppets that will do whatever you say. What's the difference between that and buying a bunch of silicone dolls? Zhang Cheng shrugged as he unceremoniously poured a raw oyster into his mouth. Pushing away the female servant kneeling on the ground, Cosmo's eyes flashed with a hint of strangeness. He quickly nodded in agreement. Makes sense. Looks like you know how to enjoy life more than an old man like me. Tell me, what do you plan to do after this mediation? I don't know. I haven't thought about it yet. If everything goes well, I will stay in Los Angeles for a while and visit the famous Hollywood, Zhang Cheng replied half-truthfully. Although, strictly speaking, it was impossible to keep a private satellite launch a secret, he still didn't want the underground world to know about it too early. Hollywood. Cosmo seemed to have recalled something, and a nostalgic look appeared on his aged face. I remember that 100 years ago, it was still a desolate town. Later, with the development of the times, it slowly became the world's largest movie production center in just 30 to 40 years. If you really want to see it, I can arrange a guide for you, an insider who really understands the development of Hollywood. Thank you for your kindness, but I still prefer to explore alone and enjoy the surprises that may appear at any time. If you don't have any other orders, I'll take my leave. After saying that, Zhang Qing picked up a white napkin and wiped the corner of his mouth, then slightly bowed. Have a good time with you. Also, I won't forget what you've done. If you need anything, call me at any time. Cosmo raised the glass of wine high and drank it in one gulp. After leaving the luxurious villa in Venice Beach, Zhang Cheng took out his phone and dialed one of the numbers in his contact list. In less than 5 seconds, Chester Barsham's voice came through the phone. Hi. My dear friend, you finally called me. How is it? Have you arrived in Los Angeles? Yes, I'm in Los Angeles. Now tell me where you live. Zhang Cheng didn't waste any time and directly began to ask for the address. I live in Beverly Hills, but it's already past 9 o'clock. I don't think you'll be able to get a taxi. Just tell me where you are, and I'll pick you up in a helicopter, Chester Barsham suggested. Needless to say, his suggestion was quite considerate, because Zhang Cheng also realized that after he left the luxurious villa area, it was like entering another world. The streets and alleys were filled with black people, prostitutes, and drug dealers wandering around. It was completely different from the relatively good security during the day. Not to mention taxis, there weren't even many passing cars on the wide road. Any local resident with a slightly normal brain would know how dangerous and chaotic it was during this time. Helplessly, he could only find a relatively conspicuous parking lot and stood there patiently waiting for the helicopter to arrive. In less than 10 minutes, accompanied by the loud noise of the propeller's rapid rotation, an unknown model of helicopter slowly descended from the sky. Before it landed, the door to the front passenger seat suddenly opened. Chester Barsham yelled at the top of his lungs, "Quick, get in. This damn place isn't safe." "Don't worry, I'm here. Even if the entire California National Guard is mobilized, I can guarantee your safety." Zhang Cheng smiled indifferently and jumped into the front passenger seat to close the door. But Chester Barsham, who was wearing headphones, obviously didn't hear what was said. He quickly increased the altitude and headed straight for the most luxurious residential area in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills. After a while, the two landed on the lawn of a villa. Just as he jumped off the helicopter, Zhang Cheng saw a young woman who looked to be around 27 or 28 years old standing at the door. Next to her stood a little boy of about 3 or 4 years old. Without asking, he knew that this must be Chester Barsham's wife and son. In addition, there were 4 large border collie dogs that smelled the stranger's scent. They bared their teeth and constantly growled threateningly, as if they were warning him not to come closer. "Good evening, you must be the Mr. Zhang that Chester always talks about. I finally meet you today. In fact, if it wasn't for my husband stopping me, I would have already come to express my gratitude." The young woman was undoubtedly well educated as she took the initiative to greet him. "Hee hee, please believe me, Your husband is definitely thinking for you. After all, I live in a dangerous world that is completely isolated from ordinary people. It is so dangerous that a beautiful and elegant lady like you should stay as far away as possible. Zhang Cheng explained with a smile. That's right, my dear. You must know that I'm doing this to protect you. Chester Barsham obviously knew how curious his wife was about the underground world. His face revealed a trace of helplessness. Calm. Wonderful bookhouse. Calm. Chapter 653. Needless to say, Chester Barsham didn't want his wife and children to know too much about the underground world. After a brief chat, he chased them to their room upstairs to sleep. After the two had left, he took a deep breath and asked in an uncertain tone, "Where are the satellites you want to launch?" "Here." Zhang Cheng calmly took out two delicate palm-sized gadgets from his pocket and gently placed them on the table. "What? Are you sure these are satellites and not children's toys or models?" Chester Barsham's eyes widened in shock. "Yes, these are satellites. I just used magic to shrink them. I'll return them to their normal size before launch." Zhang Cheng didn't try to hide anything and gave an affirmative answer. In fact, at the very beginning, he had already told the other party the size and weight of the two satellites. Therefore, the data obtained by the Western Aerospace and Missile Test Center north of Los Angeles was the normal size. Otherwise, no matter how exaggerated it was to launch two objects the size of tennis balls, there was no way they would ask for $150 million US. My God, that's incredible. But I have a question. If you can shrink the satellites to such a small size, why don't you just launch them like this? Chester Barsham's tone was full of doubt and confusion. Zhang Cheng smiled and explained, "It's simple. Think about it. If you were the U.S. government and suddenly found such a small and delicate man-made satellite, wouldn't you be curious? Wouldn't you secretly do a little test? Wouldn't you monitor what it does after it's launched into a fixed orbit? If the size of the satellite suddenly increased by tens or even hundreds of times, how would they react? Therefore, I'd rather spend a little more money than leave a lot of trouble in the future." Chester Barsham nodded thoughtfully. "So that's how it is. Then let's send the satellites to the launch center tomorrow. There's still a lot of preparation work to be done, including applying for radio frequency bands, a radio license, and orbit reporting. If nothing unexpected happens, the satellites should be able to start operating normally in about a month and a half." Obviously, he was quite familiar with the system process of launching private satellites. He had even considered the legal approvals very thoroughly. "Awesome. I'll leave the whole thing to you. Here's your reward," Zhang Cheng said as he took out a small suitcase that was about 1 square foot in size. He entered the password and opened it directly. In an instant, 20 sealed glass test tubes that emitted a faint green light were neatly placed in the shock-proof groove of the box. "This is..." Chester Barsham's breathing quickened as he picked up one of the bottles. His eyes were filled with excitement. Even though he did not know much about potions, it did not take him much effort to recognize that this was the nourishing potion that had saved his son's life. It was said to be able to cure all diseases, curses, poisons, and negative magical effects. That's right. It's exactly the same as the one I gave you last time. I want to use them to pay for the satellite launch costs, which is far better than giving you US dollars directly, isn't it? Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and blinked with a faint smile. Of course, these beautiful potions are worth much more than 150 million US dollars. I swear, if I showed them to those terminally ill billionaires, they would be willing to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in exchange for their health. Chester Barsham subconsciously licked his lips. As a peripheral member of the North American Supreme Council who controlled public opinion, he knew better than anyone the value of these advanced potions. They were not something that could be bought with money, not to mention the gold dinar that circulated in the underground world. For an ordinary person like him who did not have any supernatural powers, it would take a long time and effort to get his hands on it. But now, with these 20 bottles of nourishing potions that could be used as hard currency, he could quickly get a sum of gold dinar through mortgage, loan, and other means. Then, he could use these gold dinar as the capital to purchase and sell low-level magic items and earn the difference in price. In short, It was to fully utilize the strengths of merchants and capitalists, using the asymmetric information and the slower business mobility of the underground world to make profits for himself. Apart from that, the 20 bottles of nourishing potions also meant that he could save 20 lives at a critical moment and make them owe him a favor. The huge value of this was not something that could be compared to a mere 150 million US dollars. Then I'll leave the matter of launching the satellite to you. If it's not necessary, try not to let too many people know about this. Zhang Cheng made a request without hesitation. After sensing the shallow thinking of this guy in front of him, he could not help but secretly sigh that the hearts of capitalists were indeed black. They were much better at getting something for nothing. He just did not know if a guy like this who had been baptized by modern business culture would forcibly raise the price of low-level magic items that were already more expensive in the underground world. No problem, just leave it to me. If you had to deal with such a small matter in person, the Supreme Council would have kicked me and my family out long ago and replaced me with someone more capable. Oh, by the way, how long do you plan to stay in Los Angeles this time? If time permits, I can introduce you to a few families in California that have worked for the Congress for generations. They are very influential in politics and business. Most importantly, since you're in Los Angeles, how can you not appreciate and taste the Hollywood actresses? In the end, a smile that all men understood appeared on Chester Barsham's face. Ha ha, thank you for your kindness, but forget about the Hollywood actresses. I'm really not interested in them. Zhang Qing shook his head and rejected with a laugh. One must know that he was a firm supporter of the truth that there are no good people in the entertainment industry. Everyone who entered this circle, regardless of gender, would sooner or later be dyed black by the ink-like big vat of ink. For money, status, and reputation, male and female stars would not hesitate to sell their bodies, not to mention their souls. Only idiots would have fantasies about actors and celebrities, thinking that there would always be one or two pure white lotuses among them. But in fact, each and every one of them had vanity and desire that exceeded that of ordinary people. They would soon fall under the slightest temptation. Those who looked like pure white lotuses were just good at pretending. You're obsessed with cleanliness? Chester Barsham raised his eyebrows in surprise. It was the first time that he had met someone who would refuse his arrangement with a Hollywood actress. Even if it was a member of the secondary council or a lord, they would usually accept and enjoy the whole process. No, it's not about cleanliness. It's just that I hate to fall into pure desire. If the other party is a member of the Supreme Council, no matter how dissolute her private life is, I will gladly accept this kind of behavior that can enhance the intimacy between us. But if it was a female star with no power, why would I waste my precious time and energy on her? Remember, dear Chester, don't let the desire of the lower body control your thoughts. Only then can you be qualified to evolve to a higher level of life. Come, wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 654. After spending the night at Chester Barsham's house, Zhang Cheng restored the two satellites to their normal size early in the morning and put them into the fully enclosed truck. Then, he wandered around Los Angeles alone. It was not until close to noon that he came to a roadside Mexican restaurant and sat down, intending to taste the more famous local delicacies. But before he could decide what to eat with the menu, a short-haired woman in a white knee-length dress suddenly walked in from outside and sat across the table. She greeted him in English with a slightly strange accent. "Good afternoon, Mr. Zhang. If you don't mind, can you tell me how you managed to settle Speaker Cosmo in one day?" "Ha! The speaker's temper is not as bad as you think. To some extent, he is one of the easiest people I've ever met." Zhang Cheng spread out his hands with a mysterious smile. There was no doubt that the visitor was none other than Ms. Yvonne, another member of the Supreme Council who had asked him to mediate. Although this woman was over 45 years old, she still looked like a 15 or 16-year-old girl due to her elf blood, giving off a pure and beautiful feeling. But in fact, the powerful light element magic she had mastered was enough to melt a modern ship made of steel that weighed tens of thousands of tons in just a few minutes. She could be called a human-shaped mobile turret. Cosmo is easy to get along with. This is the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life. Did you know? 30 years ago, when I was a little girl who didn't know much, He personally led people to wipe out a tribe of Indians who were trying to awaken the ancient gods sleeping on this land. More than 1,500 people, including priests, warriors, old people, women, and children, were all killed, including the babies in swaddling clothes. By completely erasing all the people who knew the name of that god, he resolved the crisis once and for all. You actually think that such a guy is easy to get along with? Yvonne asked with a sneer. Obviously, the light elf blood in Norse mythology had left her with an inexplicable sense of justice and compassion, and she was full of disgust for the speaker's means of almost genocide. Zhang Cheng spread out his hands indifferently. So what? The world we live in has always followed the law of the jungle. The strong make the rules that are beneficial to them, and the weak can only obey and be dominated. If the weak didn't have self-awareness and even desired to do something to overthrow the rule of the strong, then no matter how miserable the end was, they would only have themselves to blame. The underground world was like this, and so was the world of ordinary people. Otherwise, why do you think so many countries were invaded and bombed by NATO after the Second World War? The reason is very simple. First of all, they are weak. Secondly, they try to resist and subvert the order established by the strong. In the end, the country ushered in an inevitable war, a war that was destined to cause heavy losses regardless of the outcome. So, you're a social Darwinist and support Cosmo's way of doing things. Yvonne frowned subconsciously. She was obviously very dissatisfied with this answer, and her eyes revealed strong doubts. It's not about whether I support or not. I'm a person who doesn't have a fixed position. As long as it doesn't infringe on my interests, no matter what the speaker decides, I will unconditionally support it. Zhang Cheng raised a finger and corrected her. But then he seemed to think of something and immediately added, "Of course, if you can offer conditions that move me, I will also support you, just like this mediation. Also, regarding social Darwinism, I do have a little inclination in this regard. You must know that the competition of survival of the fittest is an objective law that exists in nature, and it is a necessary prerequisite for promoting biological evolution. A stable and comfortable living environment may be a good thing for an individual, but it is definitely a terrible disaster for a species. But the interesting thing is that after entering modern society, many economically developed areas are trying to improve welfare and help the eliminated losers in some way. The American education industry has even proposed the idiotic slogan of making every child a winner. They don't understand that in addition to reducing the competitiveness of children, there is no positive effect at all. In the end, after entering society, they will not be able to adapt to the cruel competitive pressure and eventually become liars, beggars, vagrants, and criminals who rely on the government for a living. Believe me, when humans make a decision out of kindness and compassion, the result will generally not be good. Even if it has a certain effect in a short period of time, in the end, it will be a complete tragedy. Looks like you're the same as Cosmo. Your heart is filled with coldness and death. Forget it. I'm not here to discuss this with you anyway. Here, take it. This is the payment we agreed on beforehand. I hope we won't become enemies in the future. After saying that, Yvonne stood up and placed a worn-out leather suitcase that looked very old beside the dining table. She turned around and disappeared into the crowd. After waiting for 2 to 3 minutes after she left, Zhang Cheng casually ordered a few dishes and then carefully reached his hand into the suitcase when no one was looking. Instantly, his fingertips touched the ancient books, stone slabs, and rubbed murals that were densely packed inside. There were as many as 30 to 40 copies. Just as he was about to take out a copy to check, he suddenly heard a woman's voice in his ear. "Hello, sir, may I sit here?" He looked up and saw that it was a bespectacled Latino girl in her 20s. She was holding a thick stack of textbooks in her arms, looking like a high school or college student. As noon happened to be the peak period for eating, this famous restaurant was already full of customers. Helplessly, sharing a table became the only choice. Of course, Zhang Cheng politely made a gesture of invitation and then ignored the other party. He took out an ancient book that was densely filled with Semitic symbols from the suitcase and started reading. This book did not come from the ancient race in the Middle East more than 7,000 years ago, but from a Sassanid dynasty Manichaeism priest more than 1,500 years ago. After collecting and organizing, he recorded and preserved some of the remnants of the supernatural powers in the ancient Semitic ruins. There were even detailed annotations in many places. Even people who did not know anything could complete some interesting magic rituals through the descriptions. Waiting for the dishes to be served was undoubtedly very boring, especially now that smartphones were not so advanced. They could not surf the internet to browse information, and there were no fun games. So within a few minutes, the Latino girl across the table turned her attention to the parchment pages that were full of vicissitudes of life. Soon, a look of surprise appeared on her face. She could not help but exclaim, "Sassanid Pahlavi language? My God, this is an ancient book from the Sassanid dynasty in the Middle Ages." You can understand it? Zhang Chung looked up in surprise. After all, after the Persian region was completely Arabiized, not everyone could understand the Middle Persian language. Only a few experts and professors could barely understand part of it. Chapter 655. Of course, I'm a graduate student in UCLA's Department of Archaeology. But is it okay if you don't even wear gloves? You have to know that a 1,000-year-old parchment book is very fragile. Any carelessness could cause irreparable damage. The young girl was obviously very interested in her field of expertise. Her eyes were staring at the cover of the ancient parchment book. Zhang Chung smiled and shrugged. "It's okay. I'm only interested in the words and knowledge recorded in it. As for whether the book will be damaged or not, that's not my concern." God, do you know how much an out-of-print Manichaean parchment book from the Middle Ages is worth? Even the base price is hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. Even if you don't care about these precious relics, you should at least care about your own money. The girl rolled her eyes and reminded him. One had to know that in just a few sentences, the edges of the parchment had already begun to crumble. She couldn't help but feel a sense of heartache. After all, among all the antiques and relics, books and words that were difficult to preserve were often the rarest. At the same time, they could provide a large amount of reliable evidence for archaeological research. It's just a few $1,000,000. Do you think I care? Zhang Chung quickly flipped through the book and asked without looking up. There was no doubt that his mental state was quite relaxed, so he could chat with the girl and enjoy this ordinary and peaceful leisure time. *T. The female graduate student with glasses finally couldn't help but curse. After being choked several times, no matter how good her temper was, she couldn't help but get angry. "Ha ha, it's just a joke. Don't be angry." Seeing a trace of anger on the girl's face, Zhang Chung finally revealed a mischievous smile and handed over the ancient book that he had finished reading. "Here, this is for you. Treat it as my apology for my rudeness." "For me? Don't tell me you have bad thoughts about me." The girl subconsciously covered her chest, and her eyes were full of vigilance. "Please, miss, even if I have bad intentions, I would at least find a beautiful girl with a curvy body like a supermodel. You're still a little bit away from this standard." Zhang Chung mercilessly shattered the girl's pitiful self-esteem. The angry girl's face immediately turned red. She stuck out her chest and loudly retorted, "How am I bad? Let me tell you, I have at least a dozen people chasing me in school. So you want me to have bad intentions?" Zhang Chung touched his chin with interest as he looked up and down at the sensitive parts of the girl's body. No, damn it. I almost fell for your trick. After all, she was highly educated." The young lady only fell into the language trap for a few seconds before she quickly came to her senses and regained her composure. After noticing this, Zhang Chung couldn't help but laugh and tease. "Look, you women always have two extremes in your hearts. On one hand, you want to be full of charm and attract the attention of every member of the opposite sex. On the other hand, you're worried that you will be hurt, so you always use a kind of attitude to protect yourself. Do you still remember what I said just now? Think about it carefully. All the answers are in there." Just as he finished speaking, a waiter carried an oversized tray and served more than a dozen dishes in one breath. After carefully checking the dishes to make sure there was nothing he disliked, he took the initiative to invite her. "If I'm not wrong, you haven't had time to order, right? If you don't mind, let's eat together. It's my treat." Have you always been so self-righteous? The girl slightly raised her chin and spoke with an undisguised sarcasm. No, I used to be very humble and cautious. If it wasn't necessary, I wouldn't easily offend anyone. But then some changes happened. I suddenly felt that being too low-key isn't a good thing. It will attract a lot of flies and bugs that don't know what's good for them. A lot of times, showing an appropriate aggressiveness can save a lot of trouble. Also, I sincerely suggest that we eat together. Otherwise, even if you order in 45 minutes, the kitchen won't be able to deliver it so quickly. After that, Zhang Cheng picked up a honey-glazed roasted chicken drumstick and put it on his plate. He then began to eat with relish. The girl turned around and glanced at the crowded restaurant. She bit her lower lip and hesitated for a moment. Then, she picked up a chicken roll and stuffed it into her mouth. She began to eat with big bites. Although there were many dishes, the total amount was not large. In just a short while, the two of them had finished all the delicacies. After finishing the last grilled shrimp, Zhang Cheng picked up a napkin and wiped the corner of his mouth. He directly put the money, including the tip, on the table and walked out with his old leather suitcase. Before he walked 50 meters, he heard the female graduate student yelling behind him, "Hey, wait, you forgot something." He saw the girl holding up the ancient parchment book, panting as she chased after him. "No, that's not mine. It's yours. Have you forgotten that I just gave it to you?" Zhang Cheng stopped and shook his head with a faint smile on his face. "You're really giving it to me?" According to the contents of this book, it can be sold for at least 5 million USD at an auction. If you're lucky, it can even be sold for 10 or 20 million USD. The girl had obviously roughly read the description and interpretation of the ancient Semitic magic rituals by the Manichaeans. She understood the huge value of this book, coupled with the fact that many rich people were obsessed with magic and supernatural powers. It was reasonable for it to be sold at a sky-high price. "Yes, I'm giving it to you, but I suggest that you don't get too addicted to it. Some things are out of your control. Oh, by the way, to be safe, I should leave you my phone number. If one day your life is in danger, remember to give me a call. I can provide protection." As the last word left her mouth, a piece of paper with a phone number written on it appeared in the girl's hand. When she looked up again, she found that Zhang Cheng had disappeared without a trace. It was as if he was never there. Oh my God, could it be that I've encountered some sort of supernatural event? The female graduate student shivered subconsciously. Fortunately, it was noon, and the warm sun quickly dispelled the uneasiness and fear in her subconscious. After she stuffed the note with the phone number into her jeans pocket, she immediately got into a shabby secondhand car and drove straight to UCLA. Her heart was full of excitement. She couldn't wait to let her supervisor take a look at the content of the book and do a comprehensive examination. If this book was not a fake, then she might be able to use this opportunity to publish several influential academic papers and establish her position in the archaeology circle. She would no longer have to worry about finding a job after graduation. Chapter 656. The University of California, Los Angeles, was one of the top 15 universities in the world. It was known as the cradle of talents in American business, finance, high-tech industries, and film arts. However, compared to the more popular majors that could make a lot of money, the archaeology department was undoubtedly a more deserted place. After all, anyone with a little ambition and desire would not choose archaeology, a major that was destined to rely on government funding, foundation sponsorship, and donations from rich people. Of course, the world would never lack people who gave up everything for their ideals and interests. As a tenured professor in the archaeology department, Dr. Craig, who was nearly 70 years old, was such a person who was passionate about exploring, excavating, and protecting the most important heritage of human civilization. For this reason, he did not even get married or have children. Just as he was about to check a damaged parchment scroll that had been sent not long ago and was said to have been found in the walls of an abandoned castle in Eastern Europe, he was about to decipher part of the content from the blurry handwriting when the closed door was suddenly pushed open with a bang. A female student with glasses rushed in, raised the ancient parchment book in her hand, and shouted, "Professor, guess what I found?" "Munsa, how many times have I said it? Don't be rash." As an archaeologist, The most important thing is to stay calm at all times, because only by being calm can you make decisions in the fastest way to protect those cultural relics that are easily damaged by environmental changes. Craig frowned and reprimanded mercilessly. Because archaeology students were relatively rare, he could accurately call out everyone's name. "No, Professor, please take a look at this before we talk. I promise you will be as excited as I am after reading it." The girl called Munsa did not say anything and directly placed the heavy parchment book in front of the old man. Although the latter was a little unhappy, out of professionalism and love for archaeology, he carefully put on protective gloves and gently stroked the pages, beginning to read the contents letter by letter. In just a few minutes, the originally indifferent expression on his face turned to surprise, then from surprise to shock. In the end, his hands could not help but tremble slightly. After a full hour, Craig took off his glasses, took a deep breath, and asked with a serious face, "Where did you get this book? Don't tell me it's through illegal means. Do you know? It was the only book to date that recorded the ancient Semitic language and religious rituals. Moreover, it was written by a Manichaean priest more than 1,500 years ago. In particular, these ancient alphabets were very different from the known original Canaanite, Aramaic, and Saba alphabets. It was an archaeological discovery that would shock the entire world. This meant that there was still an unknown civilization that had completely disappeared in the river of history. I don't want to ruin everything because of the source of the book." As he said this, the old man waved his hands vigorously. Without the slightest bit of calmness that he had just mentioned, the corner of Samantha's mouth twitched slightly, and she hurriedly explained, "Please don't worry, Professor. This book was a gift from a young Asian man who was a little arrogant when I was having lunch outside." "Are you kidding? If this book is taken to the auction house, it can be sold for at least $8 to $10 million. Even if I sell you, it won't be worth that much." Craig subconsciously frowned, his eyes revealing a strong sense of doubt. "I'm sorry, Professor, whether you believe it or not, this is the truth. I'm a little confused myself." Samantha helplessly spread out her hands to show her innocence. However, she quickly remembered that she still had a phone number in her pocket, so she quickly took it out and handed it to the old man. "Here, this is his number. You can call him to confirm it." Craig glanced at it suspiciously, then took out his phone and called. After a few short rings, Zhang Cheng's lazy voice came from the phone. "Hello. Who were you looking for?" "Good afternoon, sir. I'm Craig, a professor in the Department of Archaeology at UCLA. I'm calling to confirm that this book was given to Samantha by you, right? Is its origin legal?" The old man asked straightforwardly. "Hello, Professor. I guarantee that its origin is 100% legal, but I need to remind you that this is not a book in the ordinary sense." "Not a book in the ordinary sense? What do you mean?" Craig felt a little baffled. Before he could react and continue to ask, the phone beeped and hung up. Although the meaningful words made him a little uneasy, his passion for archaeology and his strong curiosity for the unknown quickly overshadowed everything else. He threw the phone aside and said to his student, "Well, it seems like you're in luck, Manny. From now on, you're no longer my student, but an equal partner. I swear, you have the right to write your name on all the academic papers related to this book, provided that I lead the research and interpretation work." "No problem. It's my honor." The girl nodded without hesitation. Don't underestimate a signature. If the value of the paper was recognized by the academic community, then she might be hired by UCLA and become a respected university professor. In addition, deciphering an ancient book that was more than 1,500 years old and involved the ancient Semitic people. With her pitiful knowledge, it was impossible for her to complete such a difficult task. "Very good. Then let's start now. Remember, you must be absolutely quiet when you work." After that, Craig put on his glasses again, took out a pen and paper, and copied the Sassanid Pahlavi on the page line by line, and then translated it with reference materials. Because the alphabet system in the Western world was based on pronunciation, as time passed, even people in the same area would have a huge change in pronunciation. It was not as easy to translate as the hieroglyphic system in the East. While the two of them were engrossed in the contents related to magic, rituals, and supernatural powers, they did not notice that a horned monster on the spine of the book, whose entire body was bathed in blazing flames, had opened its terrifying eyes. It was like a demon that crawled out of hell, constantly releasing a sound that humans could not hear. In less than a minute, the animals within a few kilometers began to attack each other crazily. Two golden retrievers, who had always been known for their intelligence and docility, directly pounced on each other and began to bite each other. No matter how their owners shouted or pulled, it was useless. It was not until one of them breathed its last that the other released its bloody and minced mouth. Such a strange and terrifying scene not only alarmed the surrounding security guards and patrol officers, but also the news reporters from major TV stations rushed to the scene half an hour after the incident. No one knew that the culprit was actually a book, an ancient parchment book that exuded mysterious power. Come, wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 657. Without a doubt, the two of them who were busy deciphering the contents of the ancient parchment book did not notice the terrifying chaos outside. They were immersed in a state of oblivion until the sky was completely dark. Only then were they awakened by a wave of tiredness and hunger. Damn it! What time is it? Craig raised his head and glanced at the dark sky outside the window. 9:30. Professor, I think we should go out and eat something, then have a good sleep. We can continue tomorrow. Samantha looked at her watch and suggested. After all, as a young girl, her digestive system was much better than a 70-year-old man's. Similarly, it was more difficult for her to endure hunger. Plus, she didn't eat much for lunch, so she was already dizzy 2 hours ago. It wasn't easy for her to hold on until now. Craig reluctantly and carefully closed the ancient book and gently nodded his head. All right, but this book must be kept by me. Before I finish deciphering it, I won't allow it to leave my sight. I have no objections. Professor, don't dawdle. Otherwise, the restaurant in front of the school will really close. The hungry Samantha didn't want to waste too much time and directly agreed. However, Craig was obviously a little worried about leaving such an important item in the school building where there were only a few security guards. He wrapped the entire book in a protective plastic bag and stuffed it into his suitcase. Not long after, the two of them walked out of the campus and came to an ordinary fast food restaurant nearby. They ordered some hamburgers, fries, hot dogs, chicken nuggets, and the like. As they ate, they quietly discussed the problems they encountered in the translation process in the afternoon, as well as the possible ambiguities. They didn't notice at all that a powerful force had isolated the entire restaurant from the outside world. After about 3 to 5 minutes, dazzling electric sparks suddenly shot out from outside the restaurant. Then, all the electrical equipment was instantly paralyzed. The glass doors and windows were also shattered by the huge force. Outside the window that was filled with broken glass, it was no longer UCLA, but a world of fire that emitted scorching heat and flowed with crimson magma. Almost every second, heat waves could be seen rising into the air, making violent vibrations and noises. The waitress on the night shift was the first to react. She let out an ear-piercing scream comparable to a soprano. The rest of the people were not any better. Regardless of their age, almost all the women followed the waiter's footsteps and began to shout at the top of their lungs. Some even tried to call 911 for help, but found that there was no signal at all. As for the men, they were a little calmer. There was a bald, burly man who directly pulled out a large caliber revolver from his back and stared nervously at the strange scene outside. There was no doubt that if it weren't for the unbelievably realistic heat wave and high temperature, no one would believe that they were eating at the entrance of the university a few seconds ago and had arrived at a hellish place a few seconds later. Holding a half-eaten hamburger in her hand, Samantha stared at the lava that was gushing out of the restaurant. After a few minutes, she trembled and murmured to herself, "Oh my God, this is exactly the same as the third world described in the book." "Shoo, keep quiet, if you don't want to cause trouble for yourself," Craig warned with a solemn expression. As an old man who had personally experienced the darkest era of the 20th century in the United States, he knew better than anyone else what a terrifying thing an ordinary person would do when their sanity or mind collapsed in the city. Especially adult men. They would often vent their fear and uneasiness on women through violence. Then what should we do now? Samantha wasn't a fool. She immediately noticed that a few of the strong men in the restaurant revealed a strong sense of vigilance in their eyes. She even subconsciously reached into her backpack and held tightly onto the only thing that could provide her with a sense of security, the pepper spray. After all, the United States was one of the leading countries in the world with an average of more than 80,000 rape cases per year. Even famous universities weren't any better. Therefore, if she didn't want to be violated by strangers, it was common sense to carry some non-lethal self-defense weapons such as pepper spray, small taser, women's pistols, and so on. It's very simple. We need to find a place where no one is around and carefully study the description of this world in the book. Craig gave the answer without hesitation. Although California, where Los Angeles was located, had always been the gathering place of the white left, and various universities had put political correctness on the altar to the point where anyone who dared to violate it would die. Fortunately, this old professor wasn't one of them, and he didn't have the slightest intention of sharing information with the others in the restaurant, because he knew that as soon as he said something related to the ancient book, the crazy crowd might rush over and snatch it away. Some people might even try to destroy it to see if they could go back. As early as the end of the 19th century, French social psychologist Gustave Le Pen stated in his popular psychological study, The Mob, that you should never underestimate people's emotional, unobjectionable, and low IQ when they fell into groupthink. Sometimes the irrational crowd was even worse than the smarter chimpanzees. At least chimpanzees wouldn't destroy the forest that they relied on for survival, but humans who fell into groupthink would frantically destroy farmland, factories, and social order, making themselves unable to extricate themselves from hunger and poverty. While everyone's attention was attracted by the doomsday-like scene outside, Craig quickly slipped into the bathroom with Munsa, locked the door, opened the box, took out the ancient book again, and quickly flipped to the corresponding page. On the yellowed parchment, a world with hot magma spewing out of the ground was drawn. It was exactly the same as the scene outside the window at this moment. The old professor pointed a line of small words below and read aloud, "Icarite, the most powerful spirit of fire, the light and heat that originated from the birth of the world. It is neither good nor evil, just full of anger towards the gods, because the gods imprison it in an eternal prison from mankind." Before Craig could finish reading the entire paragraph, a huge volcano in the distance suddenly began to erupt violently. The rumbling, sounds, and vibrations could be clearly felt even from several kilometers away. What was even more frightening was that after the eruption ended, a creature more than 200 meters tall, completely composed of hot flames and magma, slowly climbed out of the volcano's crater. Its body was so huge that every step it took caused the ground to seriously collapse. Behind this life, there were countless large and small flame-shaped monsters, all of them charging towards the dining hall. Chapter 658. How majestic would it be to see thousands upon thousands of fire creatures charging at them? Just look at the people in the cafeteria who had fallen into a state of shock. Even the bald man with the large caliber revolver had a look of fear and despair in his eyes. Not to mention whether the bullets could do any damage to the creatures without flesh and blood. Just the 6 bullets in the revolver were not enough to deal with so many enemies. Munsa, who was hiding in the bathroom, saw this scene and asked with a trembling voice, Professor, what should we do now?" "Shut up. I'm looking for relevant information." Craig pretended to be calm as he reprimanded. Of course, if his hands weren't trembling like he had Parkinson's disease, it would be more convincing. But a professor was a professor. After quickly reading the description of the flame world, he immediately frowned and searched for similar myths and legends in his mind. After about 3 to 5 minutes, he suddenly shouted with a face full of surprise, I know. This Icarite is actually the fire spirit in the Manichaean myth, Evelit. In fact, in many places in the Middle East, before the birth of Manichaeism, there was a folk story about powerful fire creatures. According to archaeological findings, Zoroastrianism, which is the predecessor of Manichaeism, Use murals to record the story of a powerful fire spirit being imprisoned by the gods. It's obviously referring to this place. Damn it, Professor, what we need now is not these messy things, but how to stop those monsters from burning us to charred corpses. Munsa roared in exasperation. She couldn't believe that at this critical moment, the professor was still thinking about deciphering the countless puzzling mysteries in the ancient book. No, children, this is very important. Since we know the identity of the other party, we can naturally deal with them. Look, there are many magic symbols on it that can be used to drive away the fire spirits. Quick, bring a kitchen knife and let everyone in the cafeteria arrange these 3 symbols in order and carve them on the wall outside as fast as possible. If the description in the book is correct, those monsters can't be touched or even approached. Craig pointed at the 3 strangely shaped ancient Semitic letters on the back of the second page and explained, Professor, you better pray that they work, or I guarantee that those people outside will tear you to pieces before they die. After saying that, Munsa didn't care too much. She immediately ran to the restaurant and shouted at everyone. Then, she distributed the items in her hands to everyone. Although some of them wanted to ask where the strange symbols came from, they still obeyed the order obediently in fear of the approaching flaming monsters. After all, even if he wanted to make life difficult, he couldn't make life difficult for himself. If he could really survive, it wouldn't be too late to ask him later. As the saying goes, in times of crisis, humans can often erupt with unimaginable power. In particular, these Americans who had always been pampered in big cities were so efficient that their compatriots would feel ashamed of themselves. In less than 2.5 minutes, the entire restaurant was engraved with dense, mysterious symbols. When the gigantic flaming monster led its subordinates closer, everyone retreated into the restaurant and nervously stared outside. In the end, they discovered that the runes they had carved earlier were emitting a faint silver light, successfully stopping the monster's advance. The monster only continued to circle around the restaurant. Good God, we're saved. The waitress who screamed first drew a cross in front of her chest with an expression of lingering fear on her face. Don't be too happy yet. Although these guys can get close, they have no intention of retreating. Don't forget, we're trapped here now and can't go anywhere. Once we run out of water and food, we won't be in a good state. Another middle-aged man, who looked like the restaurant's chef, reminded her, Don't worry. Don't forget that this is a restaurant. The food in the cold storage is enough to ensure that everyone can eat for at least half a month. The waitress shrugged nonchalantly. Sigh, stupid woman with big boobs and no brains. Think about it. We've already lost power, and we're in an extremely hot environment right now. At most, in a few days, all the food in the cold storage will spoil. At most, in 3 to 5 days, we'll be in a situation where there's no water or food. The chef pointed out the problem with a rather helpless tone. **T. My favorite ice cream. Before it melts, let's quickly take it out and eat it with everyone. The waitress screamed as she rushed into the backstage and took out the ice cream from the machine to distribute to everyone. Because the ambient temperature was at least 40 to 50 degrees, everyone began to sweat profusely and needed something to cool down their body temperature. Just as those brainless guys began to enjoy the coolness brought by the ice cream, a few people who were more clear-headed quickly came to Munsa's side. Among them, the bald man who was the leader fiddled with the revolver in his hand and said in a low voice, Miss, I think it's best if you explain what's going on. How do you know that those symbols can stop the flame monster from approaching? That's right. We have reason to suspect that you're the culprit behind this disaster. Another person echoed, Sorry, I really don't know how to solve this. Before the girl finished speaking, she saw the old professor walk out of the bathroom and sit on the chair opposite her. He first glanced at the other party with eyes full of contempt, then sneered and mocked. Are you threatening my student? Hey, old man, watch your words. We just want to find out the truth. The bald man slammed the table and warned. Idiot. Do you think that the truth is still important in this situation? What's really important is how to get out of this situation and return to Los Angeles alive. Craig raised his head and looked at him without fear. He knew very well that if he couldn't take back the leadership at this moment, then the following days would be difficult. So no matter what, he couldn't give in at all. Do you have a solution? A white man in a white shirt around 30 years old asked tentatively. Craig lightly nodded and directly opened the ancient book on the table. Yes, everything is recorded in this book, including this world, including the runes that stop the monsters from approaching, and including the way to return. F***CK. Give me the book. The bald man didn't say anything else and grabbed the book on the spot and began to flip through it quickly. Interestingly, in less than a few seconds, an unconcealable embarrassment appeared on his face. He cursed in a low voice. Who can tell me what this crooked thing on top is? Why can't I understand a single word? When the old professor heard this, he couldn't help but smile and adjust his glasses. That's the Sassanid Pahlavi language used in the Middle Ages in Persia. Even in the whole world, there aren't many people who can understand it. My student and I are two of them. Come, wonderful book house. Come.